Hello once again, and welcome back to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. I am back. I know I've been away for 2 weeks with some real life stuff, some family, and some house hunting. I will start out by saying joining me today is Joshua Torres.
Regular host is back. Yay!
No, so thank you so much, Josh, for taking on hosting duties the last couple of weeks. You did fantastic. Yeah. Also joining me is Adam Vitale.
Hello.
Thank you, Adam, for picking up last week and the week before for all of the post recording, editing, and getting that all out to the podcast stations and things like that. We did have an issue with our previous podcast, but it should all be rectified. So if you didn't see one from us last week, it should be there up on Apple and Spotify and all those places now. So if you didn't see it, go take another look. And now let me round out the rest of the cast here. We also have George Foster.
Hello, hello.
We have James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And joining us today as a sort of special guest is George Yang.
Hi there.
So George is a freelance games writer who has a byline on RPG Site, but he also does news at GameSpot, at Funimation. And go ahead and just kind of give us an introduction of some of the other things that you've done.
Yeah, so I spend most of my time doing new stuff for GameSpot and Funimation, but I also write at a lot of other different places too, mostly reviews for other sites and interviews/features. I've been on other sites like Polygon, The Washington Post, Kotaku, Wired, a few other sites like that too.
These are some big names that you're just rattling out.
Oh yeah, yeah. I started freelancing in like 2019. So it's been like about 2.5 years since I started. I didn't expect to get this far though, honestly, if I'm being completely honest.
So my main question is, what is it like? Because I can kind of glean what it means to write news or reviews for a lot of those sites, except for like Funimation. What does it mean to write news for Funimation? Like something that's specifically tied to a publisher like that?
Yeah. So I cover most of the JRPG and game stuff at Funimation. I think before this year it was mostly just like your typical like anime news, stuff like that. But I was brought on to cover some of the more game stuff and JRPG stuff. So like for example, so maybe news about like Pokemon, the Gen 4 remakes or stuff like Scarlet Nexus, demos out. Or hey, here's Shin Megami Tensei 5 release date. So I handle a lot of the JRPG and game stuff for Funimation.
So you're basically just listing a lot of games that we cover here. So I guess this is a decent fit for us. So.
Yeah,
all right, go ahead.
And then occasionally I'll like do like a feature list. Like, hey, here's like here's some anime recommendations if you like Tales, or here's some anime recommendations if you like. I don't know, Scarlet Nexus, that kind of stuff. So
all right, okay, so trivia time. Give me 3 animes if I like Tales of Arise. What anime should I watch?
Oh gosh, what did I pick? Well, I started off with the Tales of the Abyss anime.
Okay.
That feels like cheating.
Well.
Yeah. So there are 3 non-Tales animes. Got to list qualifiers now.
Well, I thought Tales of Arise was like fantasy games, right? So stuff like Fairy Tail, Black Clover, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's probably worth mentioning that the Tales of Zestiria anime is probably better than the game.
I was going to mention that. I've heard people say that the best way to experience Zestiria is through the anime.
Yeah. I agree with that. I thought Zestiria as a game was okay. I love the combat and the armadization stuff, but everything else is just kind of like blah to me.
My personal opinion, just to get it out there, is I think I've played all 15 English Tales games, and Zestiria is the worst one.
Well, we're actually really getting into kind of like what is going to be the topic at the front end of this podcast, obviously, and this is a great podcast for Mr. Yang to join us. I'm going to call you Mr. Yang just because we have 2 Georges, and you can't stop me.
Sure.
so
that's totally fine.
So obviously, the big release for the week for our site and kind of in general, to be honest, is the newest entry in the Tales of series after a 5-year hiatus since Berseria, and that is Tales of Arise. So we've talked about this game on the podcast previously during like the news marketing preview cycle, but obviously the game is released. We've had people who have played it both pre-release and just at release as a fan. Some of us have been new to Tales, like George Foster, and then some of us have played nearly every game in the series, like I presume Adam and Mr. Yang. So
Yeah.
So this is basically what we're going to start out with and open with. And I want to get to it, but I haven't had the chance due to the real life stuff that kept me out of this podcast for the last.
Also, you're deep into
weeks.
Pathfinder, right? Which Pathfinder
that is, true.
is its own dense thing.
There was this other RPG that released in the last couple of weeks that is like the exact opposite sort of game. That's not going to be the focus of this podcast, but I'll bring it up. I'll grab it at the end. But for Tales of Arise, first of all, who here has either played it or is currently playing it?
I'm about like 5 to 6 hours into it now, which is still kind of the beginning. Still, I'm like at the spot where I barely I'm not exiting like the first fire zone, and I'm about to go to the next zone. So I have like a member with me that is gonna be a party member, I presume, very soon. I just met Rinwell, so that's where I'm at. It's weird to say, but you know, it's a Japanese RPG, so it's like 5 to 6 hours, you know, so I'm still at the beginning.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I've completed the game. I got an early code. Now I should mention that I did not review it for us. My code was for like guide purposes for our website, but our review was written by Scott White, and his reviews on the website. He liked it a lot. He gave it a 9 out of 10. He especially liked the visuals, of course. We'll get to that later. In the combat, he was a little bit less high on like the characters. He said it wasn't like his favorite cast of characters, but he still said they were good and like didn't detract at all. And he gave a 9 out of 10. So he was really high on the game, and he's a really big fan of Tales. So he was kind of excited that he got a chance to review it.
The beginning of the game is really funny though, like the whole Iron Mask shtick that they do, because you know Alphen, the main character, you don't see his face at the beginning. He's just stuck in this iron mask, and like he works as a slave, and like, you know, that's the only life he's known. So he just has like these like dorky moments because he has like in an iron mask, and like the people like responding to him. It's like, what's up with the mask? It's like, I don't know. Good question.
If you got one of the special editions, you can already like change your costume to get rid of the mask, and people will still call you Iron Mask. So that's kind
amazing.
of funny.
So, Mr. Yang, did you cover Arise for another site, or did you review it for someone else?
I had a pre-release code. I reviewed it for Inverse. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I really liked the game. I think it's really good, and I love the relationship between Alphen and Xion. And I think the game overall probably has the best romantic subplot since Tales of the Abyss between Luke and Tyr. So I really appreciated that. I
was actually thinking, just to bounce off that idea, I do think the two things, the relationship between Alphen and Xion, it did sort of remind me of Tyr and Luke. It's not quite the same, but both like characters that were sort of like forced to work together. They didn't really care for each other at first, but of course warm up over time. If I remember right, in Tales of the Abyss, they get like warped somewhere, and Tyr is basically like babysitting him, like, all right, I got to bring you back home. Also, so there is a bit of romance in this game, and that actually hasn't been in Tales for several entries now. Like Berseria didn't really have any, Zestiria didn't have any, the Zelia's
not really.
I mean, Jude was sort of infatuated with Milia, but it wasn't reciprocal.
Yeah.
And then you had like Leia. Leia was infatuated with Jude, but that wasn't reciprocal either. So it's been actually, so there's a bit of romance in this game, and actually,
Grayson's F didn't have that really either, right? I mean, you had the childhood friend with Cheria.
Yeah, you had Cheria was obsessed with Jude, but and Vesperia doesn't really have much romance either. Like you'd have to go all the way back to like Abyss or Dawn of the New World. Anyways, it's just like it hasn't been overdone. It hasn't been overdone, so it's fine. Like
I do want to just interject here, just really quick, just before we get into like the wheels really rolling on this discussion, is that obviously since we have people on the podcast that have just started, and then people who are listening haven't completed the game either. Like we'll talk about general story ideas, about what we think of the cast, what we think of the art, what we think of the voice acting, what we think of the combat. We will avoid major spoilers. If it's a premise of the game, we'll talk about it, but we'll just giving you like the reassurance that we're not going to sit here and spoil the game for you. So
thank you. I just got done with the second area, so
I haven't even started. So.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you, George, Mr. Foster. I know that you had played the game for preview. I don't know if you had also picked it up on release.
Yeah, so I kind of had a mad month of let's just buy every game that's come out. So I was like, oh, WarioWare, oh, Life is Strange, oh, Tales of Arise. So I don't know when I'm ever going to get to it, but it's on the shelf. It's waiting.
What order is it in?
No, you're never going to get to it, George. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Okay, so let me just start by saying I think there are two parts of this game that I think are undoubtedly its strengths, like unquestionably, and one is its visuals. I feel like the last 8 Tales games, from Berseria all the way back to the PS2 Wii era, they kind of all, in a way, sort of look the same. Yeah, I know there was like an HD resolution bump in there, but they kind of all had the same sort of visual style, same animation style, and things like that. And maybe they were even all on the same engine. I don't know that for sure, but it sort of feels like it. Vesperia had the nice cell shading look to it, which still looks pretty nice, and it's like colorful, but it was still pretty simple when it came to like environments and animations and things like that. So Tales of Arise, of course, now they got rid of the old engine, and now they're using Unreal Engine 4, and obviously this game has been like a huge glow up in terms of presentation, in terms of character models, in terms of the environment, in terms of character animations. When you're playing the game, things like cinematics, camera angles and things like that, it's all like much higher quality, more fidelity, more budget, if you will. And also, it's not just like it's got a little bit of a unique flavor to it as well. It's not just like an anime art style. It is very anime inspired, obviously, but there's a little bit of like a watercolor kind of palette in there too, with the environments and things like that. So it looks really great. It fits the anime aesthetic, and it looks just a unique enough for it to stand out. And it's gorgeous. It's a really great looking game. I don't know anyone who would argue otherwise. Like, you guys agree? It looks great.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. It's been fantastic to see just like how vibrant the game looks. I think it exhibits problems that are inherent to like Unreal Engine 4, like in terms of like draw distance and level of detail, like being popping up and whatnot, where you can tweak it on the PC to kind of rectify a little bit of it. But other than that, it's really like great so far. And I'm really surprised at how fast I've like accepted like the new way they present skits in the game, with the whole kind of comic manga panel style, rigging the 3D models so it's not like 2D portraits reacting to one another, but it fits. And like I it's weird how I've sort of like come to grow on that really fast already.
Yeah. Speaking of the skits, sorry, I'll get to you in a second.
Sure.
Skits, I always felt like were almost a little bit like in past games, maybe almost too like their interjections, or sometimes even too comedic in ways. But skits here, they feel less like skits and more just like natural conversations between characters, commenting more on what's going on, thoughts, ideas. Yes, there are some silly ones in there as well, but in any other game, they might just have like the characters standing in a circle or whatever, talking, and it wouldn't be very visually interesting anyway, for just not like a major scene, but just for like some general conversations here or there. But kind of just putting it in that skit mold here and there, it just works in a way as a new kind of format for skits. Whenever there's just like after a major story moment or whatever, you might get a handful, 2 or 3 skits that just are like kind of continuing the conversation, maybe a certain character's perspective or whatnot. But it's nice to get just that additional character interaction and story perspective, if you will, from the characters. And what were you going to say, Mr. Yang?
Yeah, so I was on the same boat. At first, I was kind of missing the whole cardboard cutout 2D skit style that was in previous games. But then I really warmed up to like the new comic book kind of panel stuff for Arise. It was kind of like how Scarlet Nexus handled regular cutscenes. That's what it reminded me of at first. But yeah, again, I really warmed up to the new style, and I slowly realized that this new style made it a lot more dynamic than the old style. So yeah, so in the end, I really came around to it. And as with like the character models, I think like they're like everything's like more realistically proportioned. Like everyone, like all the characters, because I feel like previous games, character models they look a little like short, but here, in Rise, I think everyone just kind of looks taller and more evenly proportioned. So that was nice.
It is kind of weird that when I think of Tales games, like my mind, the first like two that I played were Symphonia and Vesperia, which very much are in that cell shaded, not realistic proportion. And then Adam talked about like standing in a circle talking with just the dialogue bubbles over their head. That's all those cutscenes ever are. Or like if you remember what any of the action cutscenes are in Symphonia, like Colette will like throw her ring and it'll just like hover, it'll like hover across the screen, and you're supposed to just kind of like. Your mind's eye is your mind's eye is supposed to just fill in the details, but now that they have the fidelity to do that, and the weird thing about Scarlet Nexus is that when I played that, comparing its cutscene style to the skit style in Arise, is that when I first saw that, I thought it was like it felt really low budget. It felt like it was like a way to cut corners, and I still feel that to some extent. But after like a couple hours, I had come accustomed to it. I had kind of like acclimated, and it didn't really bother me because there's a lot you can do with that style. And if what it's replacing is people standing in a circle with dialogue bubbles over their head or on the bottom of the screen or whatever, then it's not really like you can make it almost more visually interesting that way. I'm not going to say that all cutscenes should be like this, of course, but I just think it doesn't show in trailers or marketing as well as it actually is implemented in game, where it ends up being fine. Like no, I have no issues with it.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? It's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but kind of how Neo: The World Ends with You does its like conversations with the portraits, almost like in a comic book style as well. I definitely agree, though, that I feel like that I can understand why some folks were a bit worried when they first saw it, because obviously that meant that there was like no like hand-drawn portraits for the characters for those skits. But in practice, yeah, I think that the 3D model comic book style actually works out better, even if it is not what people are used to.
Okay, so Mr. Yang, no spoilers, but who would you say out of the 6 main characters is your favorite? Personally, I felt the cast was decent. They're not my favorite cast, but like honestly, the fact that I didn't want to like kill any of them, like in Graces or Hysteria or whatever, is like they're pretty good. Standard. Right. So who is your favorite character? And you don't have to like spoil why if it's spoiler, but
yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Like in Tales cast, there's always one person that I really don't like. But in this, I think Arise definitely has one of the stronger casts. My favorite character, probably Rimwell, mostly because she reminds me a lot of Rita from Tales of Vesperia. Kind of like that kind of a beat spellcaster type person. She also has like a lot of the same mannerisms as Rita.
She's even somewhat similar in combat too.
Yeah, she used she said blah 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 just like Rita, which is a cold touch.
She has a magic Kazam as well.
Yeah, and then if there's any character that I just wanted to that I kind of got annoyed with, it was Law. Because Law strikes me as kind of like that sort of immature type, that like child type, but also kind of annoying. But it never got to the extent that I felt with some other Tales characters.
So I have a related question for that last comment. Did you play in English or Japanese?
English.
Okay, because
Ryan is not a fan of Bryce Papenbrook.
So I play most games in English, but I'll play like in Japanese sometimes. Like I'm not adverse to it. But so like I recently played East 9, who the main character doesn't speak very much, but is Bryce Papenbrook. And then like I don't like his work in other animes that I've watched. So when I heard that Law was Bryce Papenbrook, I'm like, all right, when I do get around to this, I might just play it in Japanese. Like,
okay, I'll play in Japanese. You're not alone.
I don't usually play in Japanese. I actually, for whatever reason, just decided to do the dub this time. I honestly don't know why, but I've been really impressed with the dub so far. Like the voice direction's really good. Honestly, it's like one of the better dubs I've heard in a recent memory.
Well, it's Ray Chase and Erica Linebeck, who are both, I think, fantastic English voice actors for the main two. So it's just the one bugbear. Just don't put them in my party, right? Then I'll just.
It is funny, like Ray Chase put out a tweet. And he reminded me that he voiced like a primary antagonist in Berseria, and now he's here as like the main hero in the next Tales title.
I actually am just slightly disappointed that a lot of these voice actors have already voiced a Tails character in the past. Like, I kind of wish there was a bit more variety, like new blood. Because, like, for example, Erica Linebeck, she was Magalu in Berseria. Law is Bryce Papenbrook. It was like 10 years ago now, but he was Asbel. He's a much better character than Asbel, at least. But yeah, it's the voice production was done by Cup of Tea director Wendy Lee, who they basically have done every game.
That's why I keep encouraging you and Brian to go into voice acting. That you can be the change you want to see.
Now, my favorite character was Dohalim. I like Dohalim. He kind of, no spoilers, but he kind of acts. He's like upper class. So he offers a perspective in the game where some of your characters are working class or whatever, but he's like your upper class character. So he offers like a genuinely good perspective there, but he also has a little bit of a silly side where he's a little bit out of touch, and they kind of poke fun at that here and there. So there's kind of this both like genuinely like interesting perspective from him, but also kind of just like this kind of fun, like he doesn't fit in at times because he is a little bit out of touch. So, but he's a good character as well.
Were you going to say something, George Yang?
Yeah. For Dohalim, Grim Puatu, which is Dohalim in the dub. He was also in Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, and he is actually one of the more new up and coming voice actors. So,
who did he voice in Intergrade?
He was
Sonon?
I can't say his name. No. It was
Billy Bob.
Deji.
Jeji.
He was Zhejie.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to hear like some of the like upcoming voice. The one game that I think did the best at like really highlighting a bunch of up and coming voice actors on the English side at least was Fire Emblem Three Houses, because a lot of those names, like those are the first time that I've heard them, and then I see them going on and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So it is always kind of a bit like whenever you have like a JRPG cast of 6 to 8 people and you've heard 5 of them before, it's just kind of like, I've heard them before, and that's kind of like the criticism that dubs often get. Go ahead.
Speaking of Fire Emblem Three Houses, the voice of Claude, whose name I forget, he is the voice of the villain in Arise.
I want to give him credit, so let me get his name.
I'm really excited.
Joey Zija. He's great. He's
he's good. He's good. I'm really excited to hear after hearing the positive responses on Dohalim. Like a pre-release, he was probably the party member I was interested in the most. Like I really want to know this dude and what his deal is. He was really fun in the demo. I really like his fighting style.
Oh man, I'm the opposite. I was keen to see more about Law, but apparently he's kind of annoying. He's Ryuji.
Well, don't take my opinion on the voice actor. Like I'm trying not to disassociate that from the character. Maybe the character's fine.
All I know about Law is from friends who are further in the game than me. All I know about Law is in battle, if you let the AI take over him, he gets into a lot of trouble really fast. He's always seems to be low on HP or dead.
He is very much a punch guy.
Yep.
So let's
So
talk
what do
about
we-
combat. Like we're going into it now.
So combat, I personally think the combat is like top tier for the series, and like top 3 or 4 entries out of a lot of them, and it's like probably the best combat in the series since Graces, and then Graces would be the bar where you'd have to argue like, is it better than Graces or not, going back 8 years or whatever. And unfortunately, I just don't. I remember liking Graces a lot, but it's been a while, so I can't say definitively either way or the other. But in any case, the combat is really strong. One component of it that I really like and it kind of comes into form in 2 different ways. Is the boost system. So the boost system, for those who haven't played and aren't aware, or maybe not there yet in the game, you fill up a meter for each character as you're playing through the game, and it fills up by like performing combos, and you can unlock things in this title grid, which we'll get to later, that make it fill up faster. And whenever it fills up, you can have any of the other characters kind of jump in to do a boost, and they each have a different effect. For example, Alphen's boost pulls out his blazing sword, which is the sword he gets from Shion, pulls it literally out of her body, and it downs an enemy and basically lowers their defense and makes them unable to move for a bit. Where Shion's boost is basically like a spread shot from her rifle that downs any aerial enemies. So when you're taking on aerial enemies, or even like an enemy that's not aerial but if they're in the air, if you do the boost at that time, it'll knock them down and keep them vulnerable for a bit. Rinwell's boost is a magic interrupt, so when an enemy is casting magic, you can have her jump in to interrupt, and so on from there. But the reason why this system is nice is because it kind of forces you to pay attention to what the enemies are doing, and it is something that you basically have every character is able to participate in some way in terms of adjusting the flow of battle and contributing to it to make enemies easier, to get them more vulnerable or whatnot. And a real cool thing about it is that even the 2 characters who aren't in your active battle party can jump in as well. Dohalim's, if you're fighting enemies that are fast, he can manifest vines from the ground, which will slow him down. And so like even if he's not in your battle party, but you end up fighting a wolf, you'll end up fighting lots of wolves. He can slow him down even if he's not in your battle party. So it kind of makes it feel like every character has sort of an even contribution to that. And then real quick here, the second component to this boost system are the boost, I believe it's called boost strikes. And these are kind of like, if you've played Tales of Vesperia, they're kind of like Fatal Strikes in Tales of Vesperia, only better. In that you fill up a meter on the enemy, and then even if they're not low on HP, as long as you can fill up this penetration meter on the enemy, then you can pull off this boost strike with one of the other characters. And these are sort of like these cut-in attacks where they're cinematic, they look great, and like combo attacks with the other characters. And it basically it'll eliminate that enemy immediately and also damage nearby enemies. And it's just like a really cool take on the Fatal Strike system, and also makes it so you don't have to always just whittle down an enemy's HP to 0. Sometimes it just makes more sense to fill up the boost or the penetration gauge and do it that way, and it looks really nice. So I think both of those components are really good.
I still can't get over that. Like, one of your stats in this game is penetration. You have like a penetration.
We're all adults here.
Penetration stat. That's like, here, there you go. Yeah.
Which character is the best at penetration based on their armament? I'm going to assume Dohalim.
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
Okay, so I have a question that this might seem like not really that important, but I am curious about it. So I remember when this was very first demoed at some Xbox showing years ago, E3 2018, 2019, I don't even remember.
2019 was when it was announced.
Oh, okay. And I remember people like they saw a brief glimpse of the overworld, and it was showing like Alphen's back facing a sunset or something like that. And people were like, are they finally doing overworld combat? And it turns out that wasn't the case. Does that really matter? Does it still feel good to have like the bespoke combat arenas where you run into an enemy and there it is? Like, do you even think about that at all, or is it fine?
It works. I played on PC, and with a nice PC, the load times in and out of battle aren't, they're nothing. So it's no big deal. I think I remember playing Zestiria, which actually had the enemies like appear on the map, and sometimes that didn't just work very well because there'd be like, you'd be like in a small room in a cavern or a sewer, and you'd like the camera would fight you. So I think in terms of like camera perspective, it's nice to have that dedicated battle zone where you're not going to like run into a wall with your camera or something like that. So
Also,
it works.
because I still like having RPGs that have battle transitions too. It's just kind of an old timey, unique, antiquated feeling. Just having a battle transition.
Well, kind of related to talking about like hallways versus arenas or whatever. I remember one of the things that I liked least about Berseria and also Zestiria was dungeon design. It was like you'd have like a general palette of like what the area is, like you're on a riverbank or you're in a literal dungeon, and it was just like wide hallways with 90-degree angles oftentimes without any, there was very little in terms of puzzles, in terms of like any sort of like gameplay involving movement. You just walked through them and that was kind of it, and they're very bland. How does Tales of Arise deal with quote unquote dungeons or field areas where you would expect to fight enemies? Does the question make sense?
I'll answer. I was waiting to see if someone else would jump in, but so there are no puzzles really, or they're very light. They're barely anything. So it's definitely not like Symphonia or even like Vesperia in terms of unlocking doors or what have
escorting
you.
Shadows.
Escorting shadows, nothing like that. I don't mind puzzle dungeons at all, as long as they don't go overboard. Which is a Symphonia has a lot of good dungeons, but they do go overboard a few times. But here, I will say, this game has been in development for a while, and they clearly spent a lot of time with asset creation. So every area in the game looks unique. You don't have to worry about like Berseria, where it kind of feels like every field area is the same, with like a slightly different coat of paint or whatever. Or definitely like Xillia. Do you remember how in Xillia there's like this open field map that was like copy pasted like 10 different times? Or the ports.
It felt too big also. Like even though like the zones themselves like aren't that big, it felt too big. Like it's like, oh man, it feels like 10 miles to get to the next area for some reason.
Yes. So, but in any case, aesthetically, every area looks unique. So they clearly spent time like literally creating the environment for each area. Dungeons themselves, they are pretty much still just there's no puzzles, that you're just kind of running in halls from room to room, or sometimes in like a path, like a trail. That there's a couple of branching paths, or sometimes there might be a ruins area with a little well that you can jump into to find like a chest or whatever. And so there are some chests sort of off the beaten path, and you actually do have to look around a little bit to find them. Some of the dungeons are a little bit labyrinthian in terms of you can either go left and right, and there's like two different paths, and some lead to an optional path with a chest at the end and things like that. So no puzzles or anything, but it's definitely better than just copy pasted like hallways. So it's kind of halfway in between Berseria's, which is not very good at all, or something like Symphonia, which is sort of puzzle dungeons. So I think it's pretty nice, and you don't have to worry about feeling like you've been somewhere before because they all look pretty unique.
I think my one like early game complaint right now, of course I'm still early in the game, but like it's very picky already about like when you can and can't fast travel. So let's say for example, like I have to go consult with Doc, this guy named Doc, about this medicine. I'm like, okay, let me go over to the Doc, and I can go fast travel to that area. It's like maybe 2 zones over. And I was like, okay, I just want to save time. So I go to him about it. He's like, well, since the enemy soldiers are not here anymore, you can go to the garrison and see if you can find something. I'm like, all right, so let me go to like the 1 zone over and try to find it. And then I found the medicine, and then I'm like, okay, let me go fast travel back to him. And then like just for some arbitrary reason, I now cannot fast travel back to the guy. I have to go like through that zone again, and just it's like not a big deal like in this one isolated instance, but I'm wondering if it'll continue to be picky about fast travel in that sense of like you can go fast travel here, but if you try to do something else. There
are actually a handful of dungeons, and George can check and make sure I'm not mistaken here. There are actually a handful of dungeons where you go through the entire dungeon and get to the end, and you fight a boss, and there's a little bit of story, and like, all right, time to go back. And for some reason, it doesn't let you fast travel back. And I'm thinking, and I was thinking at this point, like, oh, maybe that's just because on the way back something's gonna happen, and I need to trip the trigger or whatever. But then nothing did.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you make me run all the way back? I don't know, like through the dungeon. It happens like twice, I think. And I'm not sure why.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because like, you finish the dungeon, then you got to go back to like the city to get the to progress the story. But you can't just fast travel to the city because there's a cutscene in the area right before the city. So you have to you have to trigger that cutscene before you can go back into the city. So you have to end up actually manually trying to have to go back to that same area, which is kind of annoying. But I felt like in this game it's a lot easier to run away from enemies in comparison to other games, because when you run away from a battle, the overworld, the enemies in the overworld, that particular battle disappears.
Okay, I haven't tried
so you don't
that
have to
yet. So
worry about them appearing again. But yeah, that was a small annoyance. And then one thing about like the boost strikes, they're really cool, except the one thing that I did not like was how few of them they are, because there's I think 20 or 21 in total, and by the time I hit like the halfway point of the game, I had seen them all like multiple times. I got tired of seeing like any Tiger Blade for like the 50th time. These are just more variety of boost strikes.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was like 2 different ones per pair,
right,
or something.
Yeah, I can definitely already feel you on that, because it feels like it's almost random. Like when you choose a character for a boost, for the combination strike, like which character they will partner up with. So it's like when I pick Law, I want him to do the one with either Shion or Rinwell because it looks cool, and yet he always does the one with Alphen, and it's like, oh, well, that's not as cool.
Wait, so do you not?
There's also one other thing.
Do you not get a say on who, like, if you're playing as Alphen and then you do the boost strike with Law, I assume that would be the 2 that would pair up. Is that not how it works?
You pick one of the 6 characters, so you pick like Law, and then which boost strike you get will just be one of the 6 that Law can do, or 5 that Law can do. So because it's just any of those pairs. I think it is random. I don't think there's any. Besides, you pick one of the characters, and they sort of just randomly decide who's going to be the one that joins them. So. But one other small thing about boost strikes is that's a little bit. I don't know why it works like this. Whenever there's a couple of enemies in the game that are like big enemies or bosses that they don't really have like a penetration gauge, and you can only do a boost strike at like their halfway health point, and then you do the boost strike, but it doesn't actually do damage. Did you see that, George? And I don't know like why that was the case. Like you get a boss to half health, and then you get a boost strike. But it just basically allows you to go to the second part of their health bar, but it doesn't actually like do anything else. It's just I'm not sure why it works like that. So
that's
a little bit weird.
There's like 1 or 2 bosses where so you would transition to quote like phase 2 of the boss or whatever. But in order to do that, you need to trigger like a very special strike. The annoying part of that is that you can't do any damage until any additional damage until you activate that boost strike, right? So if I keep hitting the enemy, the penetration doesn't go up, then my damage will keep doing 0, 0, 0 until that boost strike comes up. And then I transition to the second quote phase of the boss, and then now my attacks will start doing damage again. So that doesn't happen very often. I think that's like maybe 1 or 2 bosses.
Speaking of bosses on a more story perspective, like what do we think about this game's like antagonists in general? Because I know in some other Tales games, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts, that a lot of times Tales games don't always nail their antagonists. Like there's some that are better than others, but oftentimes it doesn't feel like that's what you remember the games for. Does this game do any
We're
better?
getting a little bit into spoiler territory here.
Yeah,
Don't worry, I'll be careful not to say anything. But the lords that you fight, so if you've started the game, you know that your goal is to take down the lords. Most of them aren't really, they're just minor bosses. Like you take out Balsef at the very beginning, and he's introduced as like a powerful person, and he's kind of a brute, but he's just sort of your first early game boss. Not he's kind of out of there within 5 hours. But the most important lord is the last one, which if you haven't met yet, you haven't met yet. But he's probably the most important villain in the game, in a way. I don't want to say much more than that. So right. I would say the villains in this game are not. They're not fantastic. They're in some other Tales games you get villains that are maybe like foils to the characters, like in Abyss, or you get big characters like in Vesperia. You have General Alexei. He's kind of a megalomaniac sort of villain there. There's nothing quite like that, but I would just say they're not a strong suit, but they're not.
They're fine. I guess.
Yeah.
I
say more than that though.
Yeah. I always put Tales of the Abyss as like the like for me the villains in Tales of the Abyss are like the gold standard when it comes to
I don't
RPG.
agree. I don't agree.
Really?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me guess. Your problem with Tales of the Abyss, Brian, is that it's too formulaic and that they're so perfectly paired.
It's the fact that they are paired. Like the two that you mentioned, I would prefer like the megalomaniac General Alexei type versus like this is Anis's foil, and then this is Tyr's foil, and this is or whoever. And I feel like there's other series. Yeah, I can see kind of why you would like it. It's tidy, it's neat, it's very you can fit things into nice boxes. I feel like a lot of times like the Trail series, this Kaseki series does this as well. Maybe not as much recently, but like I think of Second Chapter, like the way that tower at the end works, where it's like, oh, this is the person that's pitted against Zin or whoever, or Sherazard.
Make sure to have that party member in that fight, or else you won't get a special cutscene that pairs them together in that scene.
Yeah, even though it's kind of basic, but I like the Alexei type versus the character foil type, or the like the person that you're supposed to be sympathetic for, but they have a different viewpoint, and therefore they're not evil. We just have to have them like sometimes I feel like they try to pull on like your emotions or your heartstrings a bit, and it's like, oh, this is a tragic, this person was led astray in their youth or whatever, and sometimes like, or it's someone like Duke in Tales of Vesperia, where it's like I never really got the like, why couldn't we just have hashed that out over like some coffee or
something? Duke is just like extremely stubborn. He's like, no, we must destroy everything. Sorry, spoilers.
I mean, agree to disagree, but that's kind of why I thought Vesperia was incredibly boring. I really hated the villain there.
I'll be honest, I don't.
The villain.
Is he like the Lion King or something, or what? Who is it?
Yeah. I hated that guy. I hated his backstory. I hated his reason for being. God. Personally, speaking.
We've talked about Zillia on this podcast a few times, and how like I'm willing to have someone come in and like stand up for Zillia, or not Zillia. I'm sorry, Tyria. I'm willing to have someone come in and like stand up for it and fight in its corner, but I don't think anyone has yet. So that offer stands. if you know anyone who wants to defend Hysteria, let them know.
Apparently we need to group watch the anime, man. There we go.
So what else have we not covered on Arise? We've talked about the combat in the fields. We talked about the story and the characters and the villains.
So one nice other component to the kind of like a subsystem to the battle system are the titles. And in a lot of Tales games, titles are just like a collectible. You do a certain sub-event or what have you, or sometimes throughout the story, and you just get a title. for a character, and most of them they don't do anything. Sometimes they have like a costume attached in older games, and sometimes they didn't do anything. But here, the title system is kind of derived from Graces in a way. It's sort of like a Graces light. And if you haven't played Graces, what Graces' title system was you had like a lot of them. It was like 100 titles. It was a lot. And if you did fire damage or took fire damage or did electricity damage or did other sorts of attacks or motions in battle or things like that, you would sort of build up a title gauge for that sort of action or defense or what have you. And it would sort of allow you to do more skills or maybe give you more passive abilities or more defense against fire or poison or what have you. And so it was sort of a way to build your characters in a certain way depending on what you did with them in battle and what they encountered in battle and things like that. Tales of Arise isn't so granular like that, so in depth. Each character gets 15 titles. Some of them you get through the story, some of them you get through quests, but each title opens up like sort of a mini grid on their title, like sphere grid. It's almost like a sphere grid from Final Fantasy X, only much simpler. And it allows you to give them certain like abilities, like literally arts that they can use, and sometimes different bonuses. Like for example, you might unlock a space that fills their boost gauge more quickly, or like if you do a 10-hit combo that fills the boost gauge a bit or whatnot. And so that's a pretty cool system just to allow you to tailor the characters just a bit in terms of like, oh, if I'm using Kisara is the general character, and she works a little differently because she doesn't dodge, but she blocks with her shield, her giant shield, and you can get a lot of abilities and passives for her based on like when you do a block with a shield, it raises her boost gauge a bunch and maybe gives her a 3 counterattack, and you can raise her counterattack damage from her gauge and things like that. So it's a cool system that just gives the player a little bit of agency in terms of, you know what, I like doing these sorts of things with this character, so let me unlock these skills first. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I still think the game does suffer the pitfall that a lot of action RPGs still can't wrap their head around of like, when I'm playing a certain character, can you just like give like cheater modifiers to like the AI because they can't fend for themselves? Can you like make them so like they have like a plus 50% defense modifier or something, so at least they're like not helpful in damage, or at least helpful in survivability and whatnot. Like I kind of wish more action RPGs just like kind of had the conceit of like, okay, well, you know, the AI is not gonna ever really be that useful for you. So like in a game like in Arise, like early on when you don't have the ability to use a boost strike with a down member, you know, so now you have to like balance, okay, I have to keep this AI alive because I want to have access to their boost attack and whatnot. And I can already foresee that being a frustrating thing from where I'm at. I'm just preparing for it now.
I've played some like MMOs where it's like that if you have like summoned enemies or a ranger pet or something where they take like only a fraction of the damage they normally would, because they're not going to help you that much dealing damage, but having them just die instantly because it's tuned for like the player controlling them, it just doesn't feel good. So yeah, just give them like plus 50% armor if you're not controlling them. It's not really going to help you, but it's just going to make it a little bit less frustrating. I guess who is the favorite character to play as for you, George? Because I think we talked about a couple of the others, but not what you, or did you say Rinwell? Who said Rinwell?
well, for me, Rinwell. Rinwell is my favorite in terms of like overall, like personality as a character.
Oh, okay.
For gameplay wise, I just stuck with Alvin just because sword character.
I assume Adam did the same.
I mostly play as Alphen, but Doalim's really fun too. He's really fast. He's got a lot of different characters do have some slight gimmicks to how they play. I mentioned some of them with their boosts, but like for example, Dohalim, he fights with like a quarterstaff or whatever you call it, right? But this game does also take another page out of Grace's book where if you dodge an ability at just the right time, it gives you an opening to do a counter strike. For a lot of characters, it's just a counter strike, and they are pretty powerful, like relative to a normal hit. But Doalim's, if he dodges, magically his quarterstaff like increases in length and damage. So when you're actually playing as Dohalim, it's the sort of thing where
I'm just going back to the penetration stats.
I was just say it.
Think Goku's like powerful. Think Goku's powerful or whatever.
Okay.
And so, but it's the sort of thing where when you're playing as Dohalim, and he's pretty like flashy in terms of swirling his quarterstaff around, doing a bunch of hits and whatnot. He can like shoot little energy beams from it and whatnot. But if you dodge an attack at that time, you're kind of feeling like, because now your quarterstaff is longer, it's more energetic, and it just does a lot more damage and critical hits. So it's kind of just a cool little gimmick to his gameplay in terms of that.
I think it's a shame though that they kind of went back to the Berseria a little of like like if you leave Alphen to his own devices as AI, he kind of just kills himself because his whole gimmick is like, hey, if you want to do a Blazing Sword, it'll drain his HP. And it's like, oh, so it's the Velvet thing again, where if I have him in my party and I'm not controlling him, he's just gonna kill himself. Cool.
Like Law, gameplay wise, Law is really good because he just hardly ever gets hit for me. Law also has a lot of skills and abilities that allow him to enter over limit a lot more frequently than other characters. Basically, Law, he has like his awakened state. So the more hits he lands without getting hit, he can enter like an awakened state where his stats are increased. And then there's like a bunch of abilities where it's like, in awakened state he achieves over limit more. And because of that, by far, Law is the one who, to me, can fire off the most mystic arts.
You'll see his mystic art quite a bit.
yeah, especially if he's AI controlled.
Yep.
If he's AI controlled, Law will always like enter over limit multiple times during boss battles, and then just do his mystic arts. When he's able to.
He still does die somewhat often because he's always up and close. But he does.
He character who doesn't die often.
Xion is decent because Xion's thing is that she fights with a rifle, and when you're playing as her, I actually didn't play as her much, but you can shoot these. She has actually like a set of bombs that she can throw, like energy bombs. And if you throw them and then attack the enemy that are near the bomb, you can do bonus effects and things. And she seems to do pretty well on her own with that. And because she's fighting from a distance, unless the enemy is specifically targeting her, she does a decent job staying alive. So that's her thing.
Do we have any other final comments on? Go ahead, George. I'm just trying to see if we're like exhausting all of the dialogues on this. But what are your final thoughts on what you've experienced with Arise?
So for me, I really like how the CP system is handled. So in previous Tales games, there are characters that rely on like MP. And if you drain your MP for each individual character, well, then you can't use any of those cool flashy attacks anymore. But here, it uses AG instead of any sort of MP, and AG covers on its own. So you never really have to worry about conserving your attacks. You can really just fire off as many arts as you want. But you still have to worry about CP management because you need that for healing and stuff. But that's relatively easy to recover just by like sleeping at an inn or a campfire. So I really like that. In order to balance that, in this game, orange gels are a lot more expensive to purchase compared to other games. So I really like the CP system though.
And that system with the AG is similar to what Grace's, or not Grace's had, right?
Grace's was CC.
Yeah. It's more like Berseria with a soul gauge.
Okay.
Right.
And we remember.
I know there was a little bit of hubbub about the. This might be what you were getting at about the CP, the cure points when you use them in the field. Turns out it's kind of a big no big deal at all. It's honestly not a very interesting mechanic. It's just like sometimes on a dungeon you'll see a room that's like covered in fire, and it's like, okay, I guess I'll spend 30 CP to have Alphen put his sword in there to like absorb the fire, and now you can enter an extra room. Sure, there's like an item in there, but it was never like a decision you had to make, like, should I go into this room or not? You always will. And then if you need more CP, you can always use an orange gel, or if if you're out of, let's just say you're like completely out of orange shells and you're completely out of CP, like what do? It's like just fast travel, sleep, buy some stuff, and then usually there's a fast travel point somewhere pretty close to where you already were, so it's no big deal. It's kind of sure, yeah. It's not a very interesting mechanic. Just okay, fine.
Any other final thoughts on Tales of Arise before we move on?
It's a very it's overall. I think I like the game a lot. I'm especially fond of the combat and the visuals, and the story and the characters are good enough for me. It might be my favorite game of the year so far. There's Shin Megami Tensei 5 on the, coming up. We'll see how that shapes up. But it's especially after the last several years of Tales. Berseria was a bit of a rebound and it was better, but it still wasn't fantastic. I think this game is like the shot in the arm it needed, the series needed. So I'm definitely I'm definitely interested to see what Bandai Namco will do from here. But yeah, it's a great game. If you like Japanese RPGs or action RPGs, pick it up. Oh, I do have one final thing to say that I thought was really cool. So on our website, Kite, who is our translator, so the Tales of boss is Yusuke Tomizawa. I did an interview with him a couple weeks ago. He did an interview with Famitsu. And one of the things he said in Famitsu that I thought was really cool was that he noted that we have speaking as him, we have a fan base of players, a player base, and some people will play these games more for their combat and subsystems versus like the characters. So those are the types of people that don't go to the Tales Fest, because those are more focused on the characters and whatnot. So he was like considering doing these, like, what if we do these panels or whatnot to talk about like the gameplay components and how we put these together and how we put the combat together. And I just think that's like really observant of the brand producer of a series to be like aware and observant that some people really dig into the characters and relate to them, but some people will play these games for the combat mechanics. And Tales has always been that action RPG series. I just think that was really cool for him to like consider that from his player base and be observant that there's a variety of things that people might latch onto for these games.
Yeah, and apparently, just Steam alone, like Arise has been shattering records for the series, which is unsurprising but cool to see.
Oh yeah, I remember
people on board.
I remember someone saying, like, I remember a couple of weeks ago, he said Monster Hunter Stories 2 was technically like the highest, most concurrent played JRPG, like above Final Fantasy 15 on Steam. And now Arise has just broken that again. Like it's like 60,000, something like that, concurrent peak for JRPG on Steam, which is like higher than any other one, which is...
Yeah, put in perspective, like Monster Hunter Stories 2 just a few months ago broke the concurrent record for a JRPG on Steam. Well, with an asterisk. Not counting Dark Souls, because it is technically an RPG and it is Japanese, but by a pretty decent amount, because I think Monster Hunter Stories 2 like peaked at around like 35,000 or something like that. So
also, I remember when Scarlet Nexus came out. Scarlet Nexus didn't seem to set the world on fire. It's a decent game, but I remember people were comparing that to Code Vein, another Bandai Namco game. Code Vein seems to have done pretty well, and it's concurrent on Steam is like 33,000, so similar to Monster Hunter 2 or Stories 2, where now Rise has blown out all of those basically. So it's doing really well from all perspectives here. It seems
helps that it seems like the PC port is pretty good for most people. I know, as always, there's certain people that have PC ports are like that, where no one's experience is the blueprint for everyone else's. But it seems like out of the people that I know that have played it on PC, all of them have had a great time.
Yeah, once I saw the PC config menu, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get it on PC, because when I played a PS5 demo, I'm like, this motion blur has to go somehow.
So George Yang, since you were obviously interested in coming on this podcast to talk about Arise, I want to hear like, what are your final thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think it's really good. Probably the best Tales I've played in a while. But yeah, I think it will slot in my game of the year list, along with other titles. I loved Ys 9, I loved Scarlet Nexus, I loved Neo: The World Ends With You, but Tales of Arise is definitely up there for me this year.
What was your high watermark for the series before Arise? Or maybe even still?
Well, Tales of the Abyss is still my favorite one overall.
Okay.
But I did really enjoy Berseria, especially Berseria's cast. I really liked how kind of anti-hero they were. So I did enjoy Berseria quite a bit. But Tales of Arise for me on a whole nother level. I think it's probably the best entry. I think it's the best the series has been in a while.
So it sounds like you and Adam kind of have like a similar take where it's like we all, not all, but generally agree that Berseria was a good game, but like the line between good and great might be Berseria to Arise. Now, obviously everyone's opinion will be different, but it just seems like it kind of took the time it needed to really like refine itself, reinvent itself, and take that next step. So Berseria was a rebound, like Adam said, but Arise really is kind of like something that you can truly recommend without any like those caveats or footnotes.
Yeah, on to the future with Tales of Luminaria, am I right?
It seems like they're really going to double down on that. In that same Tomizawa interview I mentioned, it seems like what his philosophy was, well, we obviously can't do a Tales of Arise every year. You know, they can't make a game like that quickly. So they're going to like try to do, you know, more frequent new Tales mobile games. And like I guess they did Cristoria just last year. It's not that old, and they're doing Luminaria soon. And I guess that's just sort of the idea. And he also did say that they are interested in doing more remasters and remakes. Maybe not remakes, but ports.
I hope that one day they bring over a Tales of Rebirth because I heard it's good and I really want to play that one.
Yeah, I own it, the Japanese version, but I haven't played it yet. I have played a little bit of the Destiny remake, which apparently is very, very good. And from what I played of it, it is, you know, that CC, it goes back to that 2D style, so very different. But like, who knows? When they re-released Vesperia, they obviously released for the first time in English all the new content for it that we never got before. So it'd be cool if they took a game that's like from the PS2 era that we did not get in the West, like HD remaster, translate it for the first time and release it. Like that would be, it'd basically be a new game for us, obviously with the understanding that it's not a brand new game, but it would be very cool to see that like in 2 years or whatever. So before the next brand new game.
Hey man, the thing
that these days,
anything's possible.
One of these days, I should finally import Tales of Innocence R and see how it is, because I've heard people say it's legitimately a really good Tales game that we just never got.
Which one?
Innocence R, the other Vita Tales game that we didn't get.
Right.
That everyone I've like heard that's played it says that it's the one that we should have gotten because it's better than
Hearts R is not great. Yeah, Hearts R is pretty. I think I scored that a 5 out of 10. It's
bring Hearts R to Steam before anything else. Fuck these people.
If Chow was here, he would give a shout out for the real Tales of Destiny 2. So I'm gonna do that for him instead.
Look, I still have a soft spot for Eternia. I want Eternia before anything else. I don't care about anyone else.
I played Eternia not that long ago, like for the PSP version, which oddly never released in North America. So I played the European version, and that game is really like for the 2D style games. It's pretty good.
I love Eternia.
Some of like the dub stuff is kind of iffy, you know, for that PSP era, but the game itself is pretty good.
So based on, we've had a number of people on staff that have played through Arise or are currently playing through Arise, and outside of the review up on the site, we've also got a series of guides talking about the side quests, the owls that you have to find across the map, a few questions about costumes and things like that. So they've been working really hard in getting these guides out and kind of just collating all the things you could possibly want to know as you're playing through the game. So those are all also up on the site. So I didn't want to talk about this at length, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but the reason why I haven't played Tales of Arise outside of life stuff is because I've been playing Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. So this is another one of those, the current definition of CRPG. It's the isometric, Baldur's Gate-ish style Western RPG, following up on 2017's or 18's Pathfinder Kingmaker. So I know that this is a kind of a game that's not really the sort of what our site focuses on a lot. We tend to focus more on the Japanese side. But this game is the sort of thing that it's like I don't know, Adam has watched me play it a little bit, is that it's just so damn dense, where it's like, if you are a numbers nerd, if you are a lore nerd, if you like reading a ton, this game just has it in spades, almost like too much in terms of kitchen sink approach. So like any game of this style, you start out by picking like a class for your self-generated character, because you basically create a character from scratch. And if you don't know Pathfinder, the tabletop game, like I do, like I don't, there's like 30 different classes to pick from, where you like, do any of you know what the difference between a warlock, a wizard, a witch, or a sorcerer are? Because apparently those are 4 very different things in Pathfinder. And then apparently also each class also has a bunch of subclasses that you have to pick from. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds, but basically this is a game that you have to play through very, very slowly, very, very thoughtfully. And that's kind of why I'm still poking my way through it. It's just because it's like swimming through like pudding.
Yeah,
don't sell the game short though. Like I think this game has also been doing really well on Steam. I think its concurrent numbers are like in the 40,000s. Like that's really good for this, isometric CRPG style game, and a lot of people like who are in that realm. And I'm interested in this game. I know the previous game was really, really long, like 100 something hours, but it seems like it's doing well. They said that it sold like 250,000 copies in its first week, which was, I think the way they worded it was the launch concurrency was double that of Kingmaker a few years ago. So it's doing better, and people seem to have, for like a relatively new IP, right? This isn't Tales that has 25 years of history. It's like well, I mean, maybe the tabletop did, but in terms of the video games,
I guess the history is that Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 edition, I think it was 3.5, people hated. So Pathfinder kind of like spun off of that to be its own tabletop game, and then these are the first 2 video games, I think, to license the Pathfinder IP, kind of like how Baldur's Gate licenses Dungeons and Dragons. I do think that for Wrath of the Righteous, it's in a better spot to release, because a couple of years ago, you were competing with Divinity, you were competing with Pillars of Eternity, you were competing with Tides of Numenera, where now it feels like you've got this Pathfinder game, and then you have the early access of Baldur's Gate 3, which is kind of just out there doing its own thing. So I feel like it's kind of got a good window for the style of game for people that enjoy these kind of tabletop conversions to video games. One thing that I will say though about Wrath of the Righteous is that it does do a similar thing with Kingmaker. One of the things that Kingmaker did that a lot of people were either okay with or didn't like, I don't think anyone really loved it, is that it took your classic real-time with pause or turn-based combat where you control a party of 5 or 6, and one of them's your druid, one of them's your paladin, one of them's your whatever, and you go through the different stories and events and dungeons. But then on top of that, it layered this like kingdom mode where you had to like get territory and build cities and things like that, or it kind of felt like very kitchen sinky approach, where it was like, I don't know if I even want to do this. Can I just have like the computer take care of this? And eventually they basically said like, yeah, you can set the difficulty to this to like super easy, and then it'll take care of itself. And Wrath of the Righteous kind of does a similar thing where like I'm about 10 hours in, and then all of a sudden it's like you've unlocked the crusade mode where you like have to form armies and like give them generals and have them march across the map and fight demon hordes. And I'm just kind of like, I'd rather just like have less is more. Like, can I just like not do this and just play the game?
Because the kingdom mode, from what you told me and from what I watched of you, it almost just feels like a separate game, right? It doesn't really integrate too much with the rest of the game. Is that the case, or not as much as it should?
It did kind of. It almost felt like just another way to fail, because if your kingdom like morale, and I assume if your crusade army morale falls too low, you lose, you fail the game. Where if you are diligent and careful and you like make sure you always get the resources you need and you never lose a fight, or you manage it appropriately, you might get something like when you're in your home territory, you get +1 to armor. It's just like, okay, I suppose that's better than the alternative. It just doesn't seem like it's really that worth it. And in the crusade mode in Wrath of the Righteous, I think it's like if you win certain fights, you might unlock certain areas of the map, hopefully. It's just one of those things where it's like, I just don't enjoy that. It's almost like Heroes of Might and Magic, which I've never played, but I've heard that's what it's compared to. It's not even that I want to get more out of it for my team or whatever. It's just that I don't find it as fun. Like, I want to play an RPG. I don't want to play this other game layered on top of an RPG. So maybe I'll warm up to it. But
I don't know if I missed it earlier, but how far are you into this game, like in terms of hour count?
Like 10. But I kind of get the feeling that like in order to play through Pathfinder Kingmaker, it was literally like 80 to 100 hours. And I have a feeling it's going to be the same here. So it's a commitment, really. I will say that the writing in terms of role playing is actually really good. And I'll just give one example because I'm already kind of going on longer than I intended. So just one example. So after you do the prologue, you are basically you're given you have new powers. You've unlocked your mythic path, which I guess is a Pathfinder kind of progression system. And the queen, who is basically like someone who's several hundred years old but is like kept young by magic, basically says like I'm enlisting you as the general of my army to clear the demons out of the world wound, which is basically like this blight on the world. Think like East Origin, where all the demons are coming from, and it's your job to clear them out because they've been a nuisance for centuries or whatever. And then you can kind of tell her like why, you're imbued by magic, you're like blessed by the gods. How come you don't ever lead your forces into battle? You have the option to say that. And obviously you have your normal alignment, like good, lawful, chaotic, evil, whatever. So I actually had my character say that. I said like, how, no one respects you if you're just barking orders and not like leading them on the field. And then she showed up in my camp later, basically disguised as a knight. And she said, remember, here, I'm not the queen. I'm now Kitrain, the soldier, or whatever. So me making that decision basically added a character to not my party, but to like my encampment. And then on top of that, I had a storybook scene on the map where this game has a lot of reading, where it'll actually kind of give you like some prose to read, like a couple paragraphs about like what you notice, and do you want to make a diplomacy check, or do you want to make an athletics check, or thing like that. And in some of the prose that I read, it actually referenced that, the knights looked on with you as you gave your speech, one of them unknowing to the rest, the queen, or whatever. And it's like, oh, so they must have bespokely had that ready for people who made that option. So I think that that's kind of where this game really shines, or has a capacity to shine, where it's like you're not just picking Paragon Renegade, like you're actually picking things that will eventually weave through the game and hopefully pay dividends. And Kingmaker actually did that pretty good as well. So it's a very different style of game.
It's also one of those things you sort of have to. You might have like a tendency to want to min-max in a way. Like I need to have the perfect outcome and make sure I pick the perfect choices to get the ideal case here. But you sort of just kind of have to accept, right? I'm going to make a choice, and it might turn out to be like a choice that helps me or hurts me, or changes things in a certain way. And there is consequences to the things you do. And you may not have perfect foresight to know that. So are you finding yourself kind of wishing that you maybe made some different choices, or?
I'm glad that I'm playing this game when it's relatively new, so I'm not tempted to be like, which choice gets me the best ROI or whatever. Right,
exactly.
I can just make like I can actually just legit role play based on my own convictions and get what I get.
I optimize everything.
Yeah, you need to write the guide for this.
Yeah, I'm not writing a guide for this. But there's already been some cases where like there's a choice and I'm not sure like what the best choice to make was. Like so there's this demon huntress who basically had like she ended up enthralling like a succubus, a dwarven soldier. And in this process, in the past, this dwarven soldier basically condemned one of his cities to ruin because he fell for this demon. And it eats at him. Everyone disrespects him. No one, like, he wasn't slain, he wasn't punished to death, but basically this guy is completely a pariah. And then later in the game, he basically falls back into the same habit where he's going to betray you again. And it's like, at that point, do you just kill him? Like, is that the appropriate thing to do at that point? He's a traitor. He'll never show his true colors. Or do you say, like, let him live, we'll take out the demon, and maybe that'll cure him? But at the time, what are your losses going to be if you let him live? Things like that, where it's like there is no clear, oh, this is the good guy option and this is the bad guy option, sort of thing. So it's really good on that front. So I hope that my lasting hope is that when I played Kingmaker for the first time, when it first came out, it eventually fell apart at the seams. It just got like I couldn't even complete it. It was just so buggy, so broken. So far, Wrath of the Righteous has been significantly better, not perfect. There's already been some times where like my character like animations are off or they disappear for a moment, and I've heard it gets worse the farther in you go.
Yeah.
just another excuse to take it slow, I guess. Hopefully it'll be kind of like Gromit laying down the railroad tracks, and they'll just be fixing up all the bugs as I approach them.
I have two quick comments. One, I know I have a couple of friends who are really interested in this game, but they actually they flat out made the decision. I am going to play Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, but maybe in like December. Just like give it time. But also, these games are just so dense and varied in what you can do. Unfortunately, that's just kind of an outcome of that is there's just so many different permutations and things that can happen in a game that like there's just going to be places that things aren't as polished here or there, and it just needs that extra.
It's going to be it's going to be the game where you'll start playing it, but there's no other releases because that's totally the landscape we live in. It's like, oh, there will totally be a time when video games stop releasing. I'll finally be able to come back to this game or get this game now, right?
Yeah, sure.
I still need to make time for Yakuza 6 at some point, but my experience with Yakuza
I still
5,
need to make time. I still need to make time for the entire Yakuza series.
All right, there's one other game that we had earmarked here to talk about, and I think it was Mr. George Foster who brought this up.
Hello.
Or was this you? Were you the one that was interested in talking about another recent release, Life is Strange: True Colors?
That was actually both
Georges
and I. Yes.
George Sigma. Yeah.
All right, let's have
let's
Foster first because you haven't had a chance to speak a lot. So, what's your experience been with Life is Strange: True Colors?
So I'm only. This is kind of the running theme. Is I'm only one chapter in. Like I finished the first chapter. I guess
it just came out, right?
Maybe. Yeah. So I played it a little bit last night. And I ended up like just rocketing through the first chapter, and I'm really, really enjoying it so far. I like Life is Strange. Like I liked the first one, I liked the second one, but I never like fell in love with them or anything. I know there are people out there who call them like the best narrative-driven games ever, which is Disco Elysium, by the way. But I don't. I've never seen them as like special like some people have. But this one, from what I've played so far, I don't know what it is about it that's changed. I guess it's just I just find it more interesting. And that's really where I'm at the moment. But
let me just jump in real quick. Tell me if I'm wrong, but this is the first game where they actually had like mo-capped characters, right?
Yeah,
I don't think the previous games did. They were just ADR. So I think that probably helps a lot in terms of animations and character faces and all of that compared to previous games. So
it also helps a lot that this is the first Life is Strange game that's not being released episodically on its initial releases. At least has the full story in there from the get-go.
That's a big one for me. It's Life is Strange 2 hit me hard with that, where I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this, and then like the next couple of episodes came out and I was like, I am no longer like as invested. Whereas this one, I'm like, no, I will probably see this through to the end. I will probably like keep wanting to play it. I think that's the danger of episodic. Anyway, other George, how do you feel about it?
So I reviewed it for Gfinity. I really do like the game. I think it's probably the overall strongest entry so far. What I really liked about it was actually the implementation of the main character's power, Alex Chen. So her power is like empathy, right? So she can see like auras and like see like the different colors of people's emotions. I don't want to get like spoilery, but George Foster, you finished the first episode, right?
Yeah, the heartbreaking bit. Yeah, that has happened to me.
So you remember the part up in the hill, where Alex uses like her power with the kid, right? So I'm not gonna get into details of that. So you would experience. So you guys can experience that yourself. But the way the power is implemented, it throughout the game, it puts Alex in really interesting, like creative scenarios. Because another facet of her power is that if the other person's emotions are incredibly strong, and those other person's emotions can actually overtake her, and then as a result, she can actually see the world through like the other person's eyes, right? And see what they're feeling. And so throughout the game, that allows for the developers to really like be creative in terms of how like in terms of like the set design, for the Haven Springs town. So I really like that aspect of it. Another thing that's really interesting is that the character, Alex Chen, she's Chinese, and so I'm Chinese as well. But it was really interesting to see how much like her being Chinese didn't really play a huge part. Like a huge part into the plot. You know, like you could swap Alex with like any other character of like another race. But yeah, it was really interesting because a lot of plots that involve like people of color, there's always some sort of like cultural angle to it. But here, there really isn't. So that was really, really interesting for me at
Now,
least.
where does this take place again? Like the game? Is it like
Haven
California?
Springs, Colorado, which is like so.
Oh,
So
okay.
Haven Springs is a fictional city, but
Okay.
like yeah, it's a made up city in Colorado.
Well, it's
Yeah,
because
so I'm white, but like whenever you have like a character that's a minority, like you don't want to obviously stereotype them, but I always wonder like, do you want to like acknowledge somewhere that they might be like they are Chinese and make it part of their character in a way rather than just nothing at all. Same thing if a character is like queer in any way. You don't want it to be the absolutely singular stereotypical defining thing of the character, but you don't want to just ignore it. So do you think it hits that balance pretty well of being a well-represented Chinese person?
Yeah, so in that aspect, it doesn't really hit on her being Chinese like really at all. There's only one part at like the very end of the game where you see something with like Chinese letters, but like that's literally it. But that also brings up the discussion of like do we need like that kind of angle? And I think like do you really need like a cultural like some sort of like cultural indicator that Alex is Chinese instead of just like looking at her? And the way that Life is Strange True Colors approaches it, I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing, because like Chinese people, people of color, they can just exist as they are, right? So even though there's no like specific,
I'm gonna say like compared to like Life is Strange 2, for example.
Right, exactly. Like actually Life is Strange 2, because Life is Strange 2 with the Diaz twins, it was very steep in like the political climate at the time. But True Colors just kind of doesn't touch upon that at all, which I think is totally fine, personally, because not every person's like life experience is the same, right? So like if Alex Chen were a real person, Alex Chen, like if she was a real person and she went through all those experiences, in Colorado, doesn't make her any less Chinese than me, if that makes sense, right? Because she's still Chinese and she still exists, And so I think the way Life is Strange Colors approaches it isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was just really interesting to note because it also reminds me of Morgan Yu from Prey.
We actually reviewed that on our site,
like Morgan,
despite it being like not a fit for it at all.
So Morgan Yu is the main protagonist of Prey. And Morgan is half Chinese, but there's really nothing in the game that really like there's no event in the game that like is like steeped in Asian culture or anything. Really, the most you get out of it is like at the very beginning of the game where you look at like Morgan's room, you can see like things from their culture, like the Asian culture, like scattered around the room and stuff like that. But that's pretty much the extent of it.
Well, also his family is his cousin or his or her, because Morgan can be male or female. His cousin or his brother is a major player in the story there as well. But I think I see what you're getting at a little bit. So obviously, I'm trying to look at this, trying to enlighten my own viewpoint because I'm also white. So I've played Prey. I've played Prey. I haven't played Life is Strange: True Colors, but Prey is interesting because it's a game that you typically play in first person. So you might argue, and you saw this when Cyberpunk came out, like who cares what the person looks like? But it's like, then why not have it? Like, why can't it be a half Chinese person? Like, let's just do it. And they can have this experience and read and understand and have the same sort of like progression through the narrative that Prey presents, or Alex Chen in Life is Strange. So let's just go ahead and do that.
Exactly.
We don't have to tie it to their identity in the way that Life is Strange 2 does. We can do that. That's also another option. And I know that some people, I know one person in particular that swears that Life is Strange 2 is the best of the series. Of course, at the time they said that, True Colors didn't exist yet. But it's just like all those options are available. So it's cool that True Colors kind of takes just a different approach to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really enjoyed Life is Strange 2 as well, especially with its like commentary and stuff like that. But Life is Strange True Colors takes a different approach. It's a different game. So, I'm totally fine with that approach too.
Mm-hmm.
About how long is True Colors? Like, so it's not episodic and whatnot.
Yeah. It's a little shorter than I think it's a little shorter than previous games, but I think it could last you maybe a good 15 hours if you look for collectibles and everything.
Fine by me.
Yeah.
We get to finish a video game, George.
It's been so long.
George, how many hours
just to mention
3 times. Twice flat.
I was just going to mention that Tales of Arise, it's not as like long as some of the previous games in the series, but it's still a good, let's just say roughly 50 hours. It's,
That's like standard, length.
All right, it's not as bad as like Vesperia that gets, to like the 60, 70 hour mark, especially if you do more. But
so if you want a brief experience, you play True Colors. If you want a standard RPG experience, you play Tales of Arise. If you want to lose your mind, you play Pathfinder. There you go.
It's fucked up that it sounds like the Tales of Arise might be one of the shortest RPGs I played this year.
I remember when I reviewed a game that was it was an indie game that was about 25 hours long. It was a game from the Grimrock devs. What was it called? I don't remember. And I said it's a brief 25 hours, and someone's like, that's not brief. So I got at that point I kind of like self-reflected, like when you write for an RPG site, your expectations are kind of skewed.
I actually specifically remember when Ni no Kuni 2 was releasing a few years ago. That game was short for a Japanese RPG, like in the 30-40 hour range, like short at 30 hours. Like, okay.
I finished Hajimari this week, and it's like, oh man, 65 hours. That's short after Cold Steel 3 and 4. It's like,
The indie game I couldn't think of was Druid Stone. Decent game. Brief 25 hours. And now we're going to move on into the topical section of this podcast. So thanks to everyone that was here to discuss their experience with Tales. Thanks for listening to me blather on around Pathfinder. And we got a little bit of cool insight and discussion from different perspectives about Life is Strange. And then obviously all the Tales of Arise, the review, the guides, even the news leading up to it, it's all up on the site. So go check that out. Other than those releases, the big headlining news for the week was obviously for some people, long-awaited PlayStation Showcase 2021. Some people expected that this would show up around E3. It didn't happen. It didn't happen in the next weeks. We were all kind of waiting for it. Finally, it was announced that it was going to happen here in this last week. So
I gave everyone their hopes and dreams. Everyone was satisfied. There were no complaints.
I was happy.
PlayStation's interesting because, like, on a direct PlayStation Studios front, in terms of RPGs, we often kind of have to stretch a bit. Like, we cover Horizon, which is kind of like open world action game with some RPG flavor. But in recent years, they've also really been pushing a partnership with like Square Enix properties, of course, being like Final Fantasy VII Remake and now Forspoken. I'm going to say Forsaken at some point and not catch myself, just so you know. So that made an appearance. And then there's some other Square Enix news. that came out during this week. So I'm going to talk about the non-Square Enix RPGs that are kind of taking like a similar approach to being PlayStation 5 exclusive, at least on the console front. And then we'll keep all the Square Enix news kind of together, and then we'll round it at the end. So here is the big surprise for me, from my perspective, from this showcase, even though it was only really just a teaser and a logo, and that is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake, announced for PlayStation 5 and PC. So I remember, here's a little bit of a short story. I remember when I was on a high school band trip, and we were in an airport, and for some reason in this airport they had a video game store. It was a different time, and on the on one of the walls they had Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic for PC, and for whatever reason I bought it on a whim during a high school band trip, and I kind of fell in love. And Adam actually brought up in a chat earlier today yesterday, when we were talking about this announcement of a remake of this game originally from 2003, how it's so interesting how Knights of the Old Republic is sort of like a seminal game for that style of Western RPG, because there's so many things that kind of can draw their lineage back to it, either whether they're directly BioWare titles or not. And it's a Star Wars game of all things. You almost don't think about that consciously. At least I don't. I mean,
yeah, because it has things like companions, and like you have like affinity with characters, which obviously becomes a BioWare staple. Yes, I know Baldur's Gate had that a bit, but it came to the forefront here. Obviously choice and consequences, light and dark side choices in terms of that predates Pre-Paragon and Renegade. Yeah.
This remake is not by BioWare. It's from Aspire.
No,
Media.
it's not.
Yeah.
That's an interesting component of this announcement.
Yeah.
So some of the details in the announcement is that Aspire Media, who worked on doing a lot of the kind of like the modern releases of some of the legacy games from the Star Wars universe, like Republic Commando, Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, they've gathered veterans from the industry to work on this Knights of the Old Republic remake, and they're getting assistance both from Lucasfilm Games as well as from Sony. So that's why it's going to be exclusive to the PlayStation 5 on the console front. And then there's a whole press release here that I haven't really...
And their wording on it is it's console exclusive on PS5 at launch, so down the road. Yeah,
they did announce it's coming to PC as well, and you'd imagine Xbox is just later.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I'm a bit of a grognard, but I actually kind of like the quasi turn. I say that in Derek.
Most true.
So this is true of Pathfinder, and it's true of Knights of the Republic, is that it's very much like a real time with pause, basically an accelerated turn based, where you will take your action. And this is how the original Knights of the Republic worked. And based on your dice roll, based on your chance to hit, based on your weapon you're wielding, you will either hit or miss. And then if you hit, you'll deal damage based on whatever tools are in play. And
for what it's worth, Knights of the Republic is literally foundation is still D&D. It like literally.
Yeah,
it is.
Which is not surprising because BioWare came from doing Baldur's Gate.
Exactly.
And I actually have never had a problem with it, but it's also kind of what I grew up with. If you play Knights of the Republic now, it can feel pretty stiff because it's like you swing, they swing, you swing, they swing, unless you have like a haste effect or something, where basically we don't know any details, or only like the vaguest details about how like this remake will either preserve that or completely throw it away, which I'm okay.
If you look up Asper Media job postings right now, they are asking for people with action RPG experience.
All right, I'm not surprised.
Right.
I guess I just hope that so action RPG is still a very broad term. Like action RPG like Tales is very different from something more like Dark Souls, which is much more slower and deliberate, and I think a bit more stat. Like the statistics of your gear, your character would play a bigger role in a Souls game versus a Tales game. And I'm not saying Tales game, they don't matter, but
your lightsaber attack will be R1, and to lock on it'll be R3. That's what
that's just Jedi Fallen Order, right?
This guy. That's how dare you speak a KOTOR like that?
But it's weird. I wonder though, like it'll be like this is a party-based game. You have your main character, and then you have your at least in the original version, you have your two companions. So yeah, maybe it will be more like Tales. I don't know. Maybe Bastila will go in and get herself killed because the AI controls her terribly. I don't know. But I do think like part of the reason that this game was so heralded when it came out, it was that it was a different sort of, it was high budget at the time, like Star Wars story of an interesting take that wasn't tethered to the movies at all, which is I think something that they kind of lost in the year. I feel like after this game came out, and obviously its sequel, there was like that period of time where every single Star Wars game was somehow tied to the Clone Wars. I'm just like, why? No one cares about this. Like, can't we just do another one?
All the people who like Clone Wars are going to come after us now. My views are not associated or completely separate from Brian's views. Asterisk.
I do think though that like, the story of Knights of the Old Republic. First, I don't want to spoil it, even though it's 20 years old. Is really kind of basic. I think the more compelling thing about it was just more the delivery, just the way it was presented. The voice acting was really good for the time. It was, it was cinematic. It was nuanced, and obviously it had the big revelation in it. Even though like the actual plot point to plot point wasn't that great. The Star Forge is a stupid idea. I'll just say that. Spoilers. But so I do wonder, like, are they just going to leave it as is, leave it as a product of the time, or are they going to try to like, just gussy it up or like add nuance? I don't know. I don't know if they should, because like nuance plus Star Wars doesn't usually work anyways.
Like the KOTOR had. That's the thing.
No, I remember. I actually in my news reporting of this, I called it a reimagining, but that was like my interpretation of it. And someone actually pointed out, like, I hope it's not a reimagining. The way they specifically put it, let me pull it up here. Is the remake is completely rebuilt from the ground up for a new generation of players.
So it's not a remaster, okay?
Not a remaster. They're doing it from scratch, from the ground up. Like, is it going to be super duper faithful? Like, where you literally go to the same places with the same quests and whatnot? Probably not. But
oh my god,
how much flexibility do they have?
You're just reminding me of that interview that they did at the PlayStation Showcase. I think it was like Sid Schumann to one of the developers. Yeah. And then the very first question after that, where it said the logo on the logo remake, his first question was like, "So is this more of like a remaster or?"
I think that was very obviously supposed to be a leading question. Like, here's your chance to say it's not a remaster. So, but he did ask the question that I was, I like when this rumor first came out, I didn't believe it, because this was sort of rumored ahead of time, because the rumor was that Aspyr, or I guess it's Aspyr Media, which sort of makes sense. I always read it as Aspyr. Aspyr Media. Aspyr. Okay. They like Brian said, they've mostly done ports. Like, they ported PlayStation 2, GameCube era games, and you get the rumor that now they're going to make a remake for PlayStation 5. It's like, really? These guys, like, they haven't really. All they've done are ports. And one of Sid Schumann's questions was basically, so you guys have done ports and now you're doing a remake. So what's up with that? He didn't ask it quite like that, but the answer pretty much was, yes, we understand. We hired on experts, including, they're very vague about it, but they imply that they have people who worked on the original games in some capacity. They say they're in cooperation with LucasArts, or whatever you call LucasArts now. Is it Lucasfilm Games?
I think
I
so,
forget what they call it. But and then also in Sony. So they say they've hired the people and have the right collaborations to do it. They're just like, trust us, we can. So we'll see.
We need to have a separate show where we try to remember like these interviews and like from memory, and just have that. It's like, this is what they basically said, if I remember.
You can completely trust our paraphrasing here.
Yeah. Sid Schumann seriously asked, "What's up with that?" Like that. He asked that, guys. So
one thing that I'm actually. So this is a very me statement, I think. But one thing I'm actually kind of bummed by this announcement is back in 2015. Knights of the Old Republic 2, which obviously was famously incomplete when it released, it actually got like a polishing pass on its PC version that made it like widescreen, made it mod friendly. It kind of tied in, if you wanted to, some of the optional fan restoration projects. It was really just kind of like a nice quality of life to be able to play.
Just to mention, Aspyr Media is the one who did that.
Oh, really? But they never did it with Knights of the Old Republic 1. So right now, if you go to Steam or GOG and you download Knights of the Old Republic 1, I believe that you can't play it in widescreen unless you go to Nexus Mods and fiddle with files, and like I'm sure you can get it to work just fine, but it's not convenient or tidy out of the box. Natural Republic 2
it's the 2003 game basically.
Yeah. So I'm just sad that, like, what if I want to experience how the game originally was, and now that's not probably going to happen.
Well, you can still buy the original version on Steam right now, but it would have been nice to get just that
the polishing patch that the second game got.
Well, the second game arguably, I mean, not arguably,
needed
pretty much absolutely needed that more, but still, it'd be nice.
Are we expecting KOTOR 2 remake? If this will probably sell very well.
KOTOR 2, if you haven't played it, it has some really good characters. Shout out Kreia especially is kind of is a very good sort of anti-hero villain.
Exactly.
Villain really, but very different type of villain. So
I'm excited.
A villain who's in your party for the most of the game. So.
Yep. But as I didn't say this clearly, but this is just a teaser, very, very little. It was a little bit of voiceover from Jennifer Hale, who played Bastila in the original game. No announcement for release window or anything, just coming to PlayStation 5 and PC, which is understandable based on how much we saw. And this is just kind of like announcing it to the world. So we'll keep this one in our back pocket, and I'm looking forward to it, despite all the hesitations that I had about all the things I mentioned. Another game that showed up at the PlayStation Showcase that is a PlayStation console exclusive, but not from Sony Studios, is Project Eve. So this is a Korean action RPG similar to in the vein of something like Nier or Nier Automata that we did originally get the announcement for about 2 years ago. And we have it covered on the site actually. But then it kind of went quiet since that point. And the announcement 2 years ago was pretty much kind of just like another teaser.
It was almost a recruitment call. Like, we're making this game. Here it is. Come work with us.
So I didn't watch the stream, but I did watch this trailer, pulled out after the fact. And it's kind of an interesting, like 4-minute, which is a pretty long gameplay trailer with story elements and dialogue and cutscenes. And that's what I was getting at. I kind of felt like after like 2 minutes, I was like, yeah, I get the idea. Yeah, I get it. It does. I do see the Nier influences. I don't know if that was intended or if everyone's just making that same comparison because it's sort of like action RPG, post-apocalyptic failure of humanity to prevent the wiping out of their race or whatever.
Okay, the weirdest part of the trailer for me, because my first thought, as the trailer ran on, like when this character goes out into space, and then like it zooms out to like this like space station kind of platform with like a weird sort of like wing thing. It has, like, basically it looked like the Final Fantasy 13 logo to me. I looked at that, I'm like, that's weird.
Yeah, so
it's probably worth mentioning that this studio is actually like headed by let me make sure I get his name right. It's Kim Hung Tae, and he is the artist. He's an artist that he did like Magna Carta, a mobile game, Destiny Child, very popular Korean artist, and so like it's his studio as like the head, dev of it, Korean-based studio, obviously. Now, I will say, when they did the trailer 2 years ago, it did say PlayStation 4 and Xbox, but like after enough years, you wonder, like, is that still the case? Like, that might have been just, wishful thinking at the time, but they confirmed it for PS5. I'm not sure if they've confirmed any other platform at this point for it.
I do want to read
since it showed up at a PlayStation event, that it might be another one of those console exclusive at launch sort of things.
I do want to read just the small part of the press release just to kind of give an overview of the premise. So in the not too distant future, mankind is expelled from Earth after losing the battle against the invaders called the Natives. To win back Earth, the player becomes Eve, the survivor of a paratrooper squad deployed from the colony who must fight through powerful enemies with new comrades. We invite you to join Eve's adventure in the face of unknown creatures on a desolate, destroyed Earth. So that's the premise, and the gameplay trailer really shows that. I actually thought that like the character model here is very generic. It feels like it's pulled out of something like Maya, like some sort of like animation suite, and just kind of like plopped into this game, like without any like accounting for whether it fits the world that it's put in. It feels that's kind of what my feeling. Like I think the environments look really good, and I actually think that the creatures that she fights in the demo actually remind me a bit of Scarlet Nexus. Like they don't just do like tendrily monsters or goblins; they really get creative. Like one of the last things she fights is like this golem with like a tire that has spikes on it for a head, kind of thing that's like placed horizontally. Like it's really creepy stuff. Like it's a donut head, only it's like a donut with teeth and razor blades, and. And like they did this thing that Josh mentioned where it's like tendrils on a space colony, but then you pull it out and it looks kind of like a wing instead of like tendrils. And that is what I actually thought like was the most interesting part about the trailer was that not the character design, but the enemy designs really felt like they were creative. They were creepy. They didn't just go to the well.
I believe they showed. I saw this a bit. I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, but they actually like model these characters like in sort of a clay style, like at their studio to like design them, which I think is cool. Like rather than just like in a program.
Go ahead, George.
Have you guys played Black Desert Online?
No.
But Fred is very, very deep into it, so
so it's a Korean MMO, and like, and so I feel like the main character in Project Eve was kind of pulled out of
the character
like desert Black Desert Online because they're very similar. Like I know in like Korean games they use like a lot of celebrities and like K-pop stars, like skins or like guest characters or whatever. And the character in Project Eve, the main character, I mean, she looks like she was pulled in from like another Korean MMO, and she has that very like I guess very typical like pretty K-pop idol looking face and design. Like she's like this very very petite like Korean woman.
One of the headlines in the PS blog thing was blood, blade, and ... beauty.
Yeah,
like this trailer was not shy to focus on her various assets. Like that's very blunt of me to say, but it's just kind of true, which I'm fine with. Like that's whatever. But the thing that bugs me more is that it just doesn't look like she fits the game she's in. Like there have been other action games that inspired this game that have attractive characters, but I feel like there's a better mesh there. Where here it just kind of feels like they have a character that they like the look of. They have a world that they design based on this cool premise that and then they just kind of smash them together. And then like it just feels weird to me. And then also part of this trailer that kind of annoyed me is that they do like almost like the I don't know if James Bourne is the right thing, but they do like a lot of like the speed up, slow down, zoom in, zoom out, like try to make the action very dynamic. And I kind of just wish they just like, can you just play it at 1.0 speed from the actual camera perspective you play from for a little bit? Like, can you stop speeding it up, slowing it down, just try to make it like, look how stylish this is. I just kind of wish it had
That's the whole theme of the fucking PlayStation Showcase. Like, please show gameplay, and like the only one that does like Gran Turismo. It's like, okay, thanks.
This game does show some gameplay that looks unedited, but it has so much flashy. Like, are you impressed yet? I'm like, oh, sure, this looks nice, but I don't know. It seems fine.
I'm going to be honest. This did absolutely nothing for me. Like, I was watching it with some other people at the time, and they were like, "Oh, this looks great," and I was like, I don't see this. I see it as it could be really good. Like, this is me just being negative and boring, I guess, but I just saw it as a hodgepodge of different things like Bayonetta and Nier, and it didn't really feel like it stood out to me at all. I'd be happy to be proven wrong if it is Game of the Year whenever it comes out. Awesome, but right now I'm like, meh.
All right, so that congratulations, you gave them their clip. They just have to cut that clip you saying Game of the Year for this game, and then it's done deal.
I feel like this trailer for me, like just based on my impressions on the trailer, just solely going off that, I feel like when Project Eve comes out, like I can see it getting like cool gameplay. It looks flashy, but like mediocre story characters. That's kind of the general vibe I get from the trailer. Yeah. Do you get what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I think is overdone is that this has she has someone speaking in her ear. Like, is it a float? Is it like a pod or what is it? But I don't like that sort of thing where it's like, Eve, this is a whatever. You have to do this. This is your objective. Someone always speaking at you, kind of like. Yeah, so it's just Oh yeah, it is like a floating sort of pod thing. It has like twin thrusters on it. It's kind of weird. Like that to me is just kind of overwrought, where it's like you have like some sort of like someone delegating what.
Let me explain what's going on.
Yeah, I'd rather it be more like a Metroid game where it's like you're there. Maybe your character can
Not
have
other
its
M.
own. Yeah, not other M. Yeah, maybe your character Eve in this case has like her own opinions and thoughts, and maybe she even talks to herself. But I'd rather have that than have like some other person like, oh, I know more about this than you do, so let me explain. Like that to me, that's just really a bland way to. What if she's what?
What if she's an android?
Oh well, that doesn't prevent anything I said from still happening. Yeah,
but
just
we'll see. When it comes out, it looks flashy enough to maybe give it a try. I don't know what to really think of it at the moment because like the trailer is so weirdly edited together.
Yeah,
that like it's hard to even get a sense of like what the hell I watched. So it's just like, okay, I guess that still exists. Sure.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see it resurface and it didn't fall into like the depths of development hell. So hopefully like maybe a mediocre trailer, but maybe that doesn't mean anything in the long run.
Anything to justify the PS5 purchase, right?
Yes. I've still only played Intergrade on mine. And the last major trailer that we're going to cover from the PlayStation Showcase is, I think, one that we all kind of expected, and that is Forspoken. Forsaken. No, Forspoken. So obviously, this is the game from Luminous Productions that was announced a couple years ago. That we learned slowly over time about the premise of the game, about the protagonist, about the voice talent behind the protagonist, but everything about the story and the premise of the game was kind of vague, and that's basically what this trailer was addressing here in a story introduction trailer. As many had either gleaned or maybe this was already announced, it is very much an isekai. Josh, what is an isekai?
An isekai is when someone from like the modern world, modern times, gets transported to another world where it's not their own, so they become sort of like they take on the players or the viewers sort of shoes. Where like, whoa, what's going on? So you have this whole exposition now. So that's what an isekai is, just another world story.
So basically, this trailer revealed that Frey, the protagonist, is originally from New York City, and I kind of thought that they could have made this more interesting, but it's literally a portal to wherever Forsaken takes place. They named the planet. I forget what it was called. I'm surprised they didn't make it like more interesting. She steps through a portal. She ends up in Forspoken land, and then turns around.
I'd rather it be like this, opposed to like what modern anime does for most of these, where it's now a running gag in these sort of isekai shows these days of like, oh, the character gets run over by a car and then they get transported to another world because they died in theirs. I'm being serious.
But I would prefer like something like she got knocked out and she wakes up or something. But instead of just like, what, a portal? Oh no! And then she turns around. And she goes, no.
Probably a reason though. Like she's probably been summoned.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Like the lead up on it, on like how it actually is presented in the game, is gonna. I assume it's gonna be more like meaningful or flashy than just like this edited trailer of like, oh, there she is. Hopefully there's a bit more context to it than like, whoa.
I like how she has this again does this sort of thing where someone talks to her, only it's not a pod, it's a sentient cuff named Cuff.
They shared the more of the talent behind this game with the people they work with. They work with Gary Whitta, who wrote Rogue One. They worked with Amy Hennig, who's most known for her work in the Uncharted series and whatnot. And then the score is being composed by Bear McCreary, and he worked on the most recent God of War game and The Walking Dead, and Gary Scheinman, which is from the BioShock series. So they have quite the talent, the Hollywood talent behind the development of this game. Like Luminous Productions and Square Enix are not being around, at least on the staff for this game, which is kind of crazy. Oh, and also I wanted to mention Alison Reimer as well from Shadowhunters, and Todd Stashwick from Devil Inside. As part of the writing talent behind this game as well. So it's just kind of a mishmash of like a lot of talent. It's kind of weird.
George Yang, what was your take on the story trailer for Forspoken?
I still don't know what it's about. Like there's that whole isekai thing. I don't think the trailer really did enough to get me to like care about what's going on. If that makes sense. It's
No,
still just
I
kind of very
Go ahead.
nebulous. Also the little like thing that like talks to you.
Oh, like
I feel like
rings, like your bracelet thing.
yeah.
Tough.
I feel like the voice is like do we need like another quippy, sarcastic kind of person to like narrator?
Grimoire voice.
Like, do we need another one of those? Honestly,
I think the thing that a lot of people like came away from this trailer is just, it's still a running thing from these Forspoken trailers. Like the way these trailers are edited and like the voiceover for them is like it's weirdly getting irritating on like the people who are watching them as well. Like the voice talent is great, but like the direction of like the trailers and what they say in them is it's the same problem with like showing Deathloop over and over again in every freaking event. And like I'm sure the game is gonna be cool, but like the way they present it and like the way they direct the voiceover for them, and like it's kind of weirdly having like the opposite effect almost of like kind of getting.
Are you talking about like the try hard quips that are like
The
it's a freaking dragon, or I just moved it with my mind. Whoa!
Yeah, I was actually going to say that really
you guys
puts
are
me
so
off.
negative.
I mean,
It's so good.
it's funny, like, but it's unintentional. It's unintentionally funny to me.
It's Zuma language. That's why I get it. That's what I'd say.
But George Yang said that he wasn't sure what the game was about, and actually, our boss Alex Donaldson is going to be putting up a little editorial on this game or on what it's been shown so far. And basically, what its premise is that he likes how it looks, but it's leaving him cold in terms of what the game has shown. And one part of that is like they've shown this game 3 or 4 times, and I still don't know what it's really about or what you do.
Well, here's the premise that they give, like from one of the trailers.
what's going on?
I was going to get to that. We know she is transported to another world, and based on this trailer, we know that the main character Freya has to take on a matriarch type of enemy named Tanta Silva, something like that. And like apparently this Tanta Silva is a threat to the world, and Freya is the one that can take her out, and that's basically all we know. Like that is it.
The line is actually, "You'd be doing us a great service by killing her." Like it's just kind of like, okay, that's very blunt. Like like.
And also moment to moment gameplay. It's like we see a lot of this flippy trails parkour stuff over cliffs, but it's like, is that what you're doing most of the time? Is just flipping over cliffs? And then it shows a little bit of combat, but I do think there are some clips of the combat that look pretty good, but there are some others with the magic that I'm just like, I'm not so sure about this. But that's a part of Alex's editorial that he's going to be doing. He's like, I'm not sure what you're doing or what it's about.
You're falling into the brief clips of like flashy cool shit, and then you don't actually know like what you're actually doing. It's the biomutant trap, man.
Yeah, I don't want to be so like, I don't know, cynical, but I feel like after seeing this most recent trailer, if anything, I'm less interested in the game. And for me, it totally comes down to the banter. It just has that terrible MCU like banter where it's like
quippy, sarcastic.
Yeah, I just don't like it.
Sorry, Guardians trailer they showed the showcase was bad, dude.
No, disagree. Loved it.
It was so bad.
Disagree.
I think I'm actually with George on the gameplay. I think some of the gameplay looks really kind of cool. How she like captures some like flying enemies in a magic floating bubble. How she's like swinging along on like a vine and she like wraps herself around like a post sticking out of a cliff, like the parkour across the rooftops. I think that's cool, but I also feel what James is saying. I'm like, please just shut up. Like, do I have a voice slider for the character that I can just?
Here we go. Please just
Well, didn't Biomutant do like the same sort of thing where they did like ninja pose or whatever on like their trailers?
Needed it. Biomutant needed it.
The fact that our go-to comparison for this is Biomutant is probably not a great sign.
Maybe I'll be less keen.
I think the narrator in Biomutant like fits better because of like the cartoony, like over the topness of the game. But like having like a quippy person in like a realistic world or like a hyper realistic environment like Forspoken, I don't think it really meshes well. It's just weird.
But like we said, it might just be a trailer thing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
By the way, I didn't announce, but the end of this trailer specifies that the current window for Forspoken, almost said Forsaken again, spring 2022, which is what it was.
That's like Biomutant.
Oh no.
Yeah, hopefully another just a trailer thing. But yeah, so I guess kind of a series of we had a short teaser trailer for Knights of the Republic, which is fine. Too long in the tooth trailer for Project Eve, and then kind of just a weird trailer for Forspoken. So average.
I just want to even aside before we go into like the Square Enix stuff, because it's still kind of Square Enix related. Like it's funny to see the reaction to Guardians of the Galaxy because it was because of its initial E3 presence of having like that 25-minute long presentation. People are already like, I already saw enough of this game. It's initial.
Yeah,
I don't want to see it anymore. Oh my god! What a
And Alex is
That's
like really on board with it. So he keeps like he's written a couple articles saying like how he's really hyped for it, and they're not landing. Like at least with the RPG site audience, I feel good. Like Alex and
You're
George
being
will have
mean
to,
to
like,
George.
My time to shine.
George. Is
I
like,
feel bad for Alex.
Play video games.
I feel
Alex
bad
like
for
this
Alex
is the next Mass
sometimes.
Effect. Like
Where he'll push for things like Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's just like, yeah.
That's me too, though. That's Marvel's Avengers. That's my story.
Did you ever play the Black Panther stuff?
No.
George, what the fuck? He's a bigger Avengers fan than you are. What the hell?
I couldn't be bothered.
Oh my gosh, what happened, George? Avengers was
They crushed my
your
spirit. They crushed my soul.
Look, Black Panther was supposed to save the game. Maybe Spider-Man?
But
But
I'm not going to keep saying maybe for the next thing. Yeah, that's true as well.
They
Oh
actually
man,
just
you know
very,
the
very-
real. Sorry.
All I was going to say was they did put out a new roadmap for Avengers, and it's mostly just kind of like small little updates here and there, like events and whatnot. But they did mention like a special mission or whatever with Spider-Man is coming relatively soon. But it was worded in a weird way. Where like is he like a full-fledged character, or do you just play as Spider-Man in like a certain mission or something? And it's PlayStation exclusive, but who knows?
I feel like the best like example of just how much the Avengers game has completely died is that before it came out, or like around the time it came out, people were so pissed about Spider-Man being exclusive to PlayStation for good reason. Now literally nobody cares. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's making us think about it because that's how little people care about the game.
And the always cursed part about the thing about the Spider-Man content being exclusive to the Sony platform is like it's absolutely probably going to be worse than like Insomniac's Spider-Man stuff.
Right. So if you're a Spider-Man fan, you're going to be playing Spider-Man and Miles Morales, and then get hyped for the 2023 release of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. So it's so weird, but
well, I'm excited for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yeah, at least someone is. I want to. If it's good, I'll give it a shot, but we'll see.
So those three trailers that we went through were kind of like the big highlights of the week. There's still a lot of other kind of bit news, so we'll just kind of roll through these. Other things from Square Enix, a couple other dates and releases. On the Square Enix front, they did reveal their Tokyo Game Show 2021 lineup. And no, Final Fantasy 16, at least listed, is not listed here. Like people were hoping that maybe they were being conservative when they said it probably wouldn't show up. But it seems like there are no plans to platform that here. Some things that Square Enix does have listed for their Tokyo Game Show showing that I'm interested in is Project Triangle Strategy, which did have that, I thought, fantastic demo earlier this year. Guardians of the Galaxy will be there, George.
Thank God.
Obviously, there'll be a segment for their two MMOs, Dragon Quest X, including Dragon Quest X Offline, which they announced at the Dragon Quest event a few months back. Final Fantasy 14 will have a presence. Some of the Final Fantasy 7 things, like the First Soldier, will have a presence. I'm mostly interested in also Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. That's
what I'm most interested in.
So yeah, the couple things that are will be interesting to see what comes out of Tokyo Game Show. I'm most eager to see more news on Triangle Strategy, perhaps a new title, maybe, or they'll just decide to go with Triangle Strategy because
I hope they do.
that's the
I hope they
precedent.
do.
I kind of
like Square Enix
triangle or something. I don't know.
I kind of just to finally see like what the hell does this Deep Insanity Asylum project mixed media?
Oh yeah,
project
there's that too.
Yeah, because that's something just like totally new and very like unknown right now, and and oddly enough, that's already planned for like a Steam release and mobile devices. So just like okay, well, so I don't know what to expect from that. But yeah, all the other ones, you know,
Forspoken will be
and,
there. I forgot to say that it'll be there too.
there you go.
Yes,
Thank you, George.
the show for me.
That's right. This is the year of George.
And Square Enix did announce that most of these events, maybe not all of them, but they put out an English press release basically saying, yes, they'll either have subtitles or interpretation. So they are aware that our broad audience will be watching this. And
Yeah,
it'll be in Japanese, but it'll either be subtitled or interpreted.
Look, you have to understand, TGS has got a long way in terms of accessibility, because this is still coming. Like the TGS in my mind is still back in the Nico days.
Yeah.
Where
How do you log in?
If you could even log in, you know, you're going to be booted off a person who's paying for their Nico account because.
Or you just watch a restream. I remember doing that.
Exactly. And then, you know, so them actually, like, YouTube streaming was a big revelation. Like, why don't we just do that on that platform too? And then now they're doing either subtitles, captions, or interpretations and whatnot. It's just like, wow, TGS is like not terrible to follow anymore.
Actually, I might have misspoke. It looks like I'm reading the press release. It says Square Enix, several game-specific stream programs will air throughout the weekend, including the following that will offer English subtitles or dubbing: Forspoken, Stranger of Paradise, and The First Soldier. That's the Battle Royale game. So it seems like there's going to be a Square Enix Presents, and that'll be available in English. And then there's going to be these 3 events, which will have English in some form. But there might be other events, like the Dragon Quest event probably won't. So...
Gotta have
partially.
Yeah, we have the caption again embedded into the video saying this is not announced for worldwide.
So speaking of Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, a few of us, I know Josh and James at least, played the stress test demo, beta, whatever they called it, a few months ago, and I think we're pretty positive on it. And they had as part of that demo, they had a pretty lengthy trial. That's what they called it. Survey for feedback and an interesting showing of kind of openness. And like I don't know if I see this a lot. I think you see it sometimes from Sega. Square Enix and Team Ninja basically published the results from that feedback, so we can kind of see in general what they're taking away from that trial, what the general impressions were from people who played it. We have up on the site, Kite again did a great job translating some of the data for us. What how it actually broke down between very good, neutral, bad, very bad, scale of 5. At a very high level, it seems like people were actually surprisingly pleased with how the game played. A little less so in terms of its visuals, but they talked about some of the things that they're going to do as post-feedback improvements, such as stabilizing the frame rate, reducing falling damage, adjusting visibility. I guess there was a lot of places where the camera would like clip into corners, things like that.
Yeah. I think I filled out the survey on stream. Like I Discord streamed like me filling out the survey because I streamed the whole demo here on the RPG site Discord. And it was like early morning or late at night. I was like, I might as well fill out the survey on stream too.
This is one that I thought was interesting. Adjust the difficulty balance to rearrange the levels from easy, normal, hard to story, action, hard. Like, to me, that's just like, okay, I suppose. Like, I guess action mode is normal mode, but hard mode is ubiquitous, I suppose.
Story, action, hard.
Where's chaos mode?
Yeah, it should be story, action, chaos. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
George, you're a genius.
All right, George, you better submit your resume.
So this game has been a fun game to follow because it was everyone just absolutely shat on it when it was first revealed, and then it sort of like turned it around where people were like, you know what, that was actually quite something. Like they have something here, and I think James was a proponent of that. And now I think I saw a comment. I forget if it was on our tweet for this or like our comments on our news post for this actually says like, I hope they do this. I hope they do this. Like people really see the potential here. Like people are eager to see this game. It's not the joke that it was during its first day of life or whatever, when it was just chaos memes. So
it's also the chaos memes kind of first started off as like almost disparaging, but now it's like somehow turned endearing. Like literally, we just got a tweet to our account, like a reply to our account 15 minutes ago. More chaos, please. I'm actually very excited for this game. Like,
no, exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at. So we'll see what comes out of a Tokyo Game Show for it.
It is a fresh idea, so I'm all for it.
Soundtrack by Mizuta.
Yep. I actually got some not really shit, but I got some playful teasing when I dared to say that I think that maybe Mizuta is a better
than Soken.
Soken, yeah.
For some context, for people who might be listening for the first time, Mizuta is the composer for Final Fantasy 11. Soken's the composer for Final Fantasy 14. If you want to hear a good Mizuta track, just type in Gustaberg, Gusta Berg. I don't remember if it's B-U-R-G or B-E-R-G. It's a very good track.
It's Gustaberg.
Yeah, well, it's one of my favorite tracks from Final Fantasy 11 from Mizuta. So it's really cool to see him like still at Square Enix and doing stuff and on another like very creative, different sort of project. The last Square Enix news is, and Adam, I saw the trailer here because I saw that you posted it. This is for a new project helmed by the Drakengard and Nier team, including Yoko Taro. Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars. Now, I watched the trailer for this, but I don't know where it came from. Did this just show up on YouTube, or where was this presented at?
It wasn't presented anywhere. They just popped up on YouTube with a press release at the same time, and like, here it is.
Yeah,
and they just tweeted it. I remember I was up way too late, and then I saw that tweet. I was like, what?
Yeah. Okay, so now I don't feel so dumb. I'm like, where did this come from? Okay. He just tweeted it out.
This is basically the big news behind Drakengard and Nier. Creative directors Yoko Taro, executive producer Yosuke Saito, and the music director is Keiichi Okabe. The interesting thing about this is the character designer is Kimihiko Fujisaka, and he does the Drakengard series and other stuff like The Last Story. And
was that the person? Was that the person behind Replicant Remaster too?
Did he? I think that was it Yoshida for that one? I forgot.
No, was it not for the remaster? Let me check on Moby Games.
Yeah, but and Yoko Taro went on to social media and clarified that this is not Drakengard series and this is not a social game. However, you choose to interpret that. In my interpretation, that means it's not a mobile game because how back in the day with Gree and stuff, they would always call their products social game or social games, and they were mobile products. So I think that's what it means. Doesn't, but there's no more clarification behind that. The way they present this is like it's a tabletop RPG like built of cards, and I don't know exactly what that means in the sense that is it like a Slay the Spire-esque type of game, or if they really want to appeal to me as a person, maybe they'll go the Eye of Judgment route, and you actually buy
cards,
and they have a mat, and you use a PlayStation camera of some sorts, and the monsters will manifest from the cards. I had an Eye of Judgment setup. Yeah, I was on PS3. It was such a cool idea that it fucking died because it didn't sell. I think it had like an expansion pack, and I think that's it. But I was like, man.
So by the way, Kimihiko Fujisaka was the character designer for the redone characters in Replicant too.
Okay, cool, nice.
So it's basically like the Replicant team.
Yeah,
on this.
So, and I think we got a teaser for this. Like when they were talking about like I don't know if it's this game in particular, but they're saying, oh, Taro is on a new project. It's a smaller scale project. I think they said was it download only, so it might be this project. Who knows?
I remember that.
Yeah, but the teaser is very it's the teaser trailer doesn't really say much. But there are people have like read the cards on them, and like the one in particular that catches a lot of people's attention is there's one card that's translated to the white colt shall bring peace to this earth and whatnot. So we'll see what the hell that means, and I'm really curious to see how this plays out. Go on.
They didn't announce any like release date or platforms or anything, but it has shown up on one of the PSNs, so it looks like it'll be at least on consoles.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing this right now. There's also a Steam DB page for it.
So the Steam page for it, someone found. Okay, yeah. So they didn't announce consoles, but we can figure out some of them.
Yeah. So at the very least, this is most likely not a mobile game, which is what people wanted, because when people are like, "Oh no, we don't want another reincarnation," it's like, not that. But yeah,
I think it's cool to do something smaller scale rather than
I'd rather see this type of project than like another Nier, or I kind of want to see another Dragon Guard, but something totally new and different, and hopefully defies expectations. I'm very, very interested in whatever the fuck. What's this title? Let's say Voice of Cards: The Isle Dragon Roars.
Yeah, it's not something that flies off the tongue, but yeah, Voice of Cards.
If you say Voice of the Cards, you're wrong.
Right?
Attack of the Titans. It just sounds wrong. So we also had another announcement in this last week from not any of the players that we've mentioned so far. This is from Nice America. So recently, in the last month, late August, I think early September in Europe, we did have the release of Prinny Presents Volume 1, which basically included remasters of Phantom Brave and Soul Nomad and the World Eaters. And when that was announced as Volume 1, kind of gave away the game that there should probably be more of these coming. And one of those was just announced in the last week. So Nice America announced Prinny Presents Nice Classics Volume 2. In this one, we've got Makai Kingdom Reclaimed and Rebound and ZHP Unlosing Ranger versus Dark Death Evil Man. Now, I will just be honest and say I don't know anything about either of these games except that one came out in 2010 and one came out in 2011. So
I've heard so much good stuff about ZHP, and I've kept meaning to play it. Now, I'm not saying I'll necessarily get it on Switch or PC, because I think it's still like $10 on PSN, and you can play it on Vita, so I might just get it there. But I've heard a lot of good stuff about it, and I saw a lot of people that were hoping that if there was a Volume 2, that ZHP would be in it.
Oh, yeah, these are actually exactly the two games that I saw people like speculating before it was announced. Like, I hope Volume 2 has Makai Kingdom and ZHP, and turns out it's exactly what it has.
The ZHP version is like the one with the extra content in the portable version, right?
No, that's
you mixed
Makai
it up.
Kingdom.
Yeah, ZHP was only ever on PSP.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I have no idea if I thought ZHP was on PS2.
Okay. So I haven't played any of these games either, but obviously when reporting this, I did my basic ass research. But Makai Kingdom released on PS2, and it's a strategy game. And it released worldwide. It had an English version and all that. But then it got a PSP version in Japan years later, in 2011 or so. And that version, like a lot of NIS, PSP, and Vita ports, had new content. But that one was never localized in English before. And so this version of Makai Kingdom, which is called Reclaimed and Rebound, it seems to include that PSP content in English for the first time. So that's probably why it has a new subtitle, because the Makai Kingdom subtitle was different before. But yeah, so that content is actually new for us.
Chronicles of the Sacred Tome.
Yeah, that was the original subtitle.
So I guess when I saw the 2011 date for that, I didn't realize that was a PlayStation Portable version specifically. The original PS2 version came out in 2005. So that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I've been meaning actually. So I've played the first two Disgaeas, and I like them well enough. I want to play other Disgaeas, but I've been waiting for 3 to release on PC or something. I know I could play 4 and 5, and I know they're not related, but I kind of want to go in order anyway. And I did start a playthrough of Phantom Brave, but I haven't finished it. And I'm interested in Soul Nomad and both of these games. So one of these days, I'm just going to go on like a NIS binge and play all these strategy games. But I've only played the first two Disgaeas for now.
That's cool that they're being brought back like from modern platforms and whatnot.
Oh yeah, we should. I don't know if we mentioned it outright. It's a Switch collection of the two, but also both of these games are being released on Steam, kind of individually. So
That's how
that's collection on Switch. Right?
Yeah, Volume 1, I think the games were already on PC.
Phantom Brave was, Soul Nomad was not. So in this case, neither game was already there. So in this case, both games, they'll be released on Steam at the same time as the Switch collection. I know. I heard that I haven't heard much about the PC version of Soul Nomad, If it's anything like Phantom Brave, it's just a basic PC port, nothing fancy, which for these games is probably all it needs.
Yeah.
But I heard that the Switch version of Prinny Presents 1 was like full of like crashes, and people are guessing like memory leaks and things like that. So it's just like, that doesn't sound great.
Yeah, I'd heard some issues. A few friends of mine on Twitter picked it up, and there was some really baffling stuff. Like, for whatever reason, there's a mouse cursor in the Switch version.
Hell yeah. That's weird. But hopefully it's a better state with this round of re-releases, I guess. But
And it's
I think
the date on these is spring 2022.
I think
Also-
that the people some of the two titles that people really wanted the most, and a good number of them nailed it. Like, yeah, here are two of the most wanted games from this backlog.
Anyways, one also semi-interesting component to these is that these are announced and released by NIS America first, and then NIS Japan kind of tags along later. So that's always a little bit interesting, that it's sort of an initiative from the Western branch to port these, and then sort of gets back localized into Japanese for their releases. Like, I believe Prinny Presents Volume 1 for Japan wasn't announced until very recently before it released, and it's only like a digital version over there, where here you can buy a physical Switch version if you want. So that's a little bit interesting, how it's sort of the localized Western branch is taking the initiative behind this to do these re-releases.
We did also get a new trailer for the upcoming game Monark. We've talked about Monark on a few podcasts before. This is sort of like the SMT-inspired game from Landcars with some Shin Megami Tensei talent behind it. Now, this new trailer for it is a pretty lengthy trailer, but it is from the Monarch YouTube channel and not the English-facing NIS America published YouTube channel. So the trailer's in Japanese only, doesn't have any closed captioning, but it is, it's like, I still watched it. You can still get a really good feel for like the dreariness of the series, the setting, the premise. The music is also, quite good with it as well. So just some more media to chew on for those that are looking forward to Monarch, which is releasing in Japan in not too long, October 14th. So basically in a month. Also one of those early 2022 games for us in the West. So I don't know.
Have enough early 2022 games.
Yeah, it always feels like, I feel like people say this every year, but like the first quarter of every year, people kind of like dread, like, everything is Q1 of the next year. But I think what eventually happens is that one or two or three of those end up getting like plucked out, and they fall in like May or June instead, and it usually ends up working out okay. But yeah, as of right now, 2022 is stacked for us in the West, at least in the early going.
Worth mentioning that, obviously a lot of fiscal years end in March, so usually you have a bunch of games that release right, like, we got to get it out for the fiscal year. So that's often why Q1 is sometimes full of these big games.
I really wonder, like, what's going to be the initial reception to this game is next month when people start getting their hands on it. I'm very curious.
I hope it's actually good. It's like a smaller new IP. Just hoping that it's not like, mediocre like Caligula Effect was.
No. Or like too derivative from like its inspiration. So,
I've heard some good things about Caligula 2, which is also releasing soon for us. But yeah, the first one I actually kind of detested. I played the original version. Apparently the new version is better, but that original Caligula Vita version is terrible.
So Atlas published the Vita version.
Yeah,
got delisted in like May or something like that. So because the game was digital only, like you cannot get the Vita version at all anymore.
No,
it sounds like
preserve it.
It sounds like Overdose is better. Like, I hated that game so much. I have a hard time like taking anyone's word for it, but apparently it's better.
Dude, you could sell your Vita with it like for like billions soon, dude.
I have one of the few thousand copies of the original.
I know some
version.
people are gung-ho about preserving every version of a game, but Caligula on Vita is kind of in the same mind space as Ys 8 on Vita, where if that version was just never saw the light of day ever again, there would be no loss because the other versions are just subjectively better.
Look, well, time will prove us wrong when in like 2050 they'll be like selling for like 3,000 each.
2015. We're going back in time.
2050, 50.
The interesting thing about Monarch is that like the marketing on the English side has not been very much. Like the Nice America had a few months ago, their announcement trailer saying that they were going to bring it next year, and then I think they posted like the opening movie when that was revealed, and that's kind of been it so far. Everything else has been for the Japanese marketing, which is fine because it's coming out next month in Japan, but just kind of it feels like a little bit like a time capsule, like this is how it was 10 years ago, where we had to look at these Japanese trailers, or 20 years ago, and try to glean what we can because we weren't going to learn about it until the year or two after the fact. So we might need to wait until like January or December of this year to really get more English facing details about this premise and things like that, or just wait for import impressions. We did get a Western release date for the Neptunia and Senran Kagura crossover game, Neptunia Cross Senran Kagura Ninja Wars. So this is actually coming out this week in Japan, September 16th, and will be out in North America on October 26th and in Europe on October 29th. It's kind of interesting because when this game was first announced, I remember when it first showed up. What event was it at? I forget what it was at, but it first showed up as a big surprise, like back in March.
It's like a compile art teaser on YouTube or something. I think
something like that. And we didn't really have anyone on staff at the time that was really interested, but now we've got Nathan, who's like really gung ho about this game and big Neptunia fan. So we will get the proper actual like critical review of Neptunia and Senran Kagura Ninja.
I reviewed a Neptunia VTuber game this year with the proper critical thing. Wow.
But are you a Neptunia fan, or did you do it out of
I've played almost all the games. I'm not saying I'm a fan, but I've definitely played almost all the games.
Okay.
What do you think the HD and HD Kieran stands for?
Whoa. That's fucked up, dude. Don't bring that up. It's like GOG, dude.
Okay. But I know that Nathan is really eager. I'm eager to see like what his take is on this. And if you want to contribute, if you're going to pre-order this or import it, Josh, you're free to talk about it next week if you want. You can play this. You could play this game by next Friday, depending on if you were able to get a digital copy. I don't know.
I do know people are still like waiting for like the next mainline one because it's been a while. And this year there's the VTuber game, there was the re-release of the first game, and now there's this spin-off, which is a new game, but like, you know, I know people are waiting for like a new mainline. Like, or does mainline even exist anymore for Neptunia?
I love how the PS5 port of the first game's remake has Go in the Japanese title, and you can say, oh, that's for the 5 and PS5, but it could also be 5 for this is the 5th time they've done a remaster / port of this.
And I've seen comparisons like the PS4 versus PS5 version, and it's like they like bumped up the contrast. It feels like that's all they did. I saw someone compare it to that Alex Jones picture where he's just like tan. So I just thought that was a funny comparison. But yeah, Senran Kagura Cross Neptunia next month for us in the West. This month, we do also have, well, actually not even this month, coming out in 2 weeks is Lost Judgment, and it has a demo available in Japan, available now, but that demo does have English, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, but you can play it in English. So if you want to play the demo for Lost Judgment, it is available on Japanese PSN. So do we know why it's not available in the West?
Probably gonna announce it like in the coming week.
It'll probably be a Monday announcement.
Yeah. It'll probably be coming probably soon. So
all right, but
we shall see.
Yeah, it depends on how eager you are. But from what I've heard so far for Lost Judgment, it seems like it's shaping up to be a really, really solid step up from the original game. Just should be one of the highlights of the year.
It's also, just to mention, we've mentioned this before, but it's cool that both Tales and this Lost Judgment game, both established series, but both the first time for either one that they're getting a simultaneous worldwide release.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
What a big contrast when another long running RPG series is getting a new release this month, and we're not going to get it in the West until 2024.
Weird. Weird.
We did also get another announcement that Moon is coming to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. This was a game that originally released on PS1, but then was re-released last year. Actually made our top 10 for its Switch version. It did get announced for Steam a few weeks ago, and now it is also going to be released for PlayStation 4 and 5. No release dates on any of these. Even on Steam, it just says coming soon. So this could show up at any time on Steam or the Sony consoles.
So a PS5 version, dude. I was waiting for that. I need the haptic feedback.
Is it good? Like, I imported a physical copy of it from Japan. I was like,
it's honestly fantastic. You know, like
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, definitely. Go play through it.
Just have a huge backlog of just other stuff.
Yeah, relatable. Is there a problem, George Alpha?
Tales of Arise is stressing me out. You guys have made it seem good, but it's too long.
Oh, you're
George. Tales of Arise is a short JRPG.
Yeah, come on, George.
You're just spoiled by Kingdom Hearts, or at most are like 30 hours.
I love it though. That's perfect.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Kingdom Hearts, clearly.
Tales of Arise. Look, if you just mainline Tales of Arise, I'm sure it'll be around that time. Easy. You don't have to play the content of the game.
We'll see.
Look. Here's the solution to our problem. We just get George to play Persona 5 Royal, and by the time he's done, every other JRPG will seem short in comparison.
Ooh.
We did get a sales update for 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. We got news in March that it had surpassed 40,000 total sold copies worldwide, but just this week they revealed that it has reached the 20,000 milestone in Japan alone. So no update. 200,000 milestone in Japan. So 200,000 in Japan as of this week, 400,000 worldwide as of March. So we've been going for 2.5 hours. Sorry, I'm holding it together. But just kind of cool to see that this game and its superb word of mouth is selling well relative to expectations, including Japan and outside of Japan. So
I fucking love this game. I love this game so much. My favorite game last year. Oh my god! I think it does kind of put that only on PS4. I think if it also came to PC and Switch, it could have been. Yeah. It could have done even better in terms of sales. But yeah, I love the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so weird. Like, it's not weird because Vanillaware is they're very, very small teams. So trying to port it, like taking the time and resources to put it elsewhere instead of like try to make a new game it's a tricky proposition, and whatnot. But yeah, it's cool to see I imagine to some people. Like, they see like 200,000 or 400,000. It's like, oh, it's not a million seller and whatnot compared to like my favorite game and whatnot. But it's impressive for this kind of game because this kind of game has such a limited appeal in terms of like it's a very story focused game, and the way it presents its story is very unconventional. On top of it having like a light RTS like game on top of it, it's like target audience and market is like limited in scope. It's not going to be for everyone.
Also, brand new IP.
Yeah.
On the same token, that's a lot of money for like a smaller Japanese release, but I do worry if it's enough for it to be an actual success. Because look, if you really like think about like how much time and effort and money must have gone into the artwork and everything, you start to wonder, well, how much did it need to sell to start to be successful?
Yeah, I don't know.
That unfortunately we won't know unless the developer kind of gives us a peek inside. And some background for George Sigma or Yang, whichever one he is that when we had our Game of the Year deliberations for this, Josh and a couple others really pushed for this to be our Game of the Year, and it was like a 1A 1B. If we had that deliberation again, it could have been. And it ended up winning our best story or narrative. And at the time, we really had to fight Alex Donaldson mostly to put it over Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then the discussion around this game was so passionate that I early this year or late last year ended up playing through it myself, even though it's not the sort of game that I typically play. I loved it a lot, and I remember I went back to Josh and said like, best narrative, this shouldn't have even been close. Like, you can argue game of the year, sure, but like narrative wise, Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm sorry if you're a fan of that, but it's not nearly as compelling or interesting as what this game attempts. So it was a cool kind of a game for my history, because like the word of mouth, I had known that it was getting good reception, good reviews, but then like having experienced that discussion over that game of the year podcast, I was like, all right, I'm gonna take the plunge and try something different and stretch a bit and get out of my comfort zone, and I'm glad I did. The last thing that we have on the docket here is, I guess, a semi sort of follow up from one of the discussion points either last week or the week before where I wasn't here. And this involves the PlayStation 5 version of Horizon Forbidden West. So obviously Horizon Forbidden West was previously slated to come out in the launch window, but got pushed back into 2022. And somehow during that process, it eventually dropped the idea of being able to upgrade from the PS4 to the PS5 version. And there were several articles about like what versions of the game you would have to get. And it ended up being like you had to get the $80 digital deluxe version in order to be able to play on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 with no upgrade path, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of drama around it. You guys covered it in one of the previous weeks. And then
we actually, in our podcast last week, we had a pretty long section on this about, this weirdness in terms of like no upgrade, or you have to buy an expensive digital version to get both. But then like it was literally revealed like an hour or two after we finished recording that this is the headline that you're getting to.
Yeah, well, and also I tie into the fact that we had the upload error, so some people might have just now listened to that podcast. Oops.
Oh yeah,
time sucks.
Oh gosh, I didn't think about that. We're gonna get roasted, crucified.
Well, we're making good on it now. So in a blog post from Boda Vries, the community lead of Guerrilla, basically saying that they are going to allow a free upgrade path for PS4 owners to PS5 for Horizon Forbidden West. And then for
I think you misstated that. I think the original blog post was from that Guerrilla community person, but then the addendum to that, I believe, was actually from Jim Ryan himself.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Bo wrote the original blog post, and then that blog post was updated. Okay, I get you.
Okay, yeah, so two things.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So two things. The whole reason this happened in the first place is that Sony said that through 2021, like any PS4 to PS5 upgrades would be free. They kind of changed that a bit with like, because they didn't necessarily do that for Ghost of Tsushima, and they kind of got around it by saying, well, it comes with the DLC on its own and all that. And can I be spicy here for a second? I actually found a Reset Era post I agreed with, basically going over how it's actually kind of bullshit that these like next gen upgrades you have to pay for. I think I agree with that, because if a game's being developed for PS4 and PS5 at the same time, why should the PS5 version cost any different?
That's a good point. That is actually a pretty good point.
Because it makes them more money.
Yeah, and people say, well, it costs more money to develop a PS5 game, but like one of the selling points they said is, well, no, with an SSD, it's actually easier to develop stuff because you have less redundant data, and with a much stronger CPU, you don't have to worry about it as much as with the PS4. It's like, I don't know. It's just like somebody made a really excellent point where it's like, if you're a PC gamer, you kind of expect when you get a new GPU, it's not that you're just playing new games, but you can go back and play older games at higher frame rates, at higher resolutions, and see the difference. And I don't know, it just feels like it just doesn't sit right with me.
It's entirely manufactured, where the engines used to make these games, for the most part, are scalable. And even as someone that's not knowledgeable in that area, the fact that you can play PC games and see that in real time as you update the texture maps or the assets or the shadow quality or whatever. So just because they put a certain set of the engine in a certain box and call it PS4, or another box called PS5. Now it might be different if it's exclusive and it's using proprietary stuff that it's not going to see on PC, and it's designed around the hardware and it's not a cross-gen game. Then sure, your argument might hold more water there. But all of this just seemed completely manufactured, which is why there was outrage in the first place, and why the second part of this updated blog post is that God of War Ragnarok and Gran Turismo 7 will have a $10 upgrade fee. So we'll have an upgrade path, but it won't be free. And so basically that's kind of, it's not as loud as the Horizon one was, but it's kind of a sticking point where it's like, why is that even $10? That's just completely arbitrary.
Because they put the new MSRP at $69.99 at the start of this generation.
Yep, and that's the answer.
And the thing that really messes me up with that is that, well, first off, I think the $70 price point is really bullshit, because if there was one company that was doing fine at the $60 price point for their AAA releases, it was Sony. Like, their first party offerings sell enough that they did not need to raise the price to break even or anywhere close to that. It's pure greed, pure and simple. And the thing that gets me is that they use the argument that, oh no, PS5 games are such a premium experience, that's why they're $70. Well, if you're going to do that, then sure, for stuff like Returnal or Ratchet & Clank, that makes sense. Those are PS5 only games. They could only run on PS5, presumably. But then you're releasing PS4 games and PS5 games at the same time. The PS5 version costs $70. When the whole reason you give for the price hike is, well, you can only get these experiences on PS5, that really rubs me the wrong way.
You gotta pay extra for proper lip syncing to the Japanese language track, man. That'll always be a funny thing to me.
Yeah,
I agree. Pretty much.
I know some people will say, like, well, games have been $60 forever. It's time for them to be $70 because of inflation. But like, when you look at like the revenue these companies are bringing in through DLC and microtransactions and season passes and all that, then like their bottom line's not hurting. Like, at least in the terms of this, when we're talking about these scopes of games, like for indie games or things like that, you could talk about their monetization has to be different, which is why you see them partnering with people like Epic Games for the releases or whatever. But for this, like, Sony's not hurting. Like, look at the revenue that every single year their services department and how much PlayStation is carrying the Sony brand at this point. Like, this isn't a crutch that they needed to keep themselves afloat. So I don't think the inflation argument really holds that much water.
Yeah, and then also keep in mind that like, especially if especially considering that I don't think the extra $10 is going to like developers, it's going to like executive pockets. If that makes sense.
It's we can't know that for certain, but it's one of those things where, like, if we don't know otherwise, like, how do we know? Like, what you're saying sounds just as plausible to me. Like, I would not be surprised.
Yeah, and then again, like, Sony isn't hurting at like a $60 price point. Like, even Days Gone, which is probably like the black sheep of all the PS4 exclusives. I think Sony then came out and said, yeah, the game made a profit, but it just wasn't profitable enough to warrant a sequel, compared to the other games like Last of Us 2 or Ghost of Tsushima. So, like, even Days Gone, made a profit at $60. That kind of thing. And
most of the revenue is from their services anyways, from like PlayStation Plus, PlayStation Home, or not Home. The streaming service.
PlayStation Now.
That's what
the glory days of PlayStation Home. If only you got it.
Yeah. And then I think only Sony is doing this. I think if it was the other folks like Microsoft, like Sony is in that position. They're in that number one position. Like, I don't want people to interpret this as like a console war thing, but like, Sony has been in lead the entire PS4 generation and is carrying that over to the PS5 generation. So Sony is able to call these shots and this kind of stuff, simply because they're in this lead compared to like Microsoft. Microsoft's smart delivery, Play Anywhere, that kind of stuff, like the more consumer friendly stuff, because they kind of have to. While Sony could just get away with, whatever the hell they want.
Just for due diligence, I do want to say that Microsoft did attempt to like really, really hike up their service price. I forget what it was, but it was like effectively doubling it. And that got similarly like, what the hell are you doing? And then they had to backpedal in a very similar manner. So no company is your friend, basically, is what I'm getting at.
Pretty much. And it's just, well, like Sony will continue to deliver like this message that like they are the premium thing. Like you even see it in the PlayStation Showcase 2021 logo, like of the face buttons being made of diamonds and whatnot. It's what it is right now, and as long as people keep on paying, that's the way it's gonna go, and how it's always gonna be,
And I think James kind of brought up a good point. Like, if you argue that the $70 price point is for that premium kind of like brand quality sort of expectation, almost like a Nintendo seal of quality, only for the modern age, and it's a PlayStation 5 experience you can only get there, then sure, charge $70 for Returnal. And then like that's their right as market leader, I suppose. But it does kind of break down a bit when you get into cross-gen with upgrades and delays out of a launch window, kind of reneging a previous expectation. That's when things kind of go awry.
I'm glad that so far third parties haven't like done that like price segregation yet. Like Tales of Arise on PS5 is still $60 if I remember correctly. So as of the moment, third parties, haven't done that yet. We'll see in the future.
Well, I think Activision did, but they're Activision, so
right. Yeah.
And that is that's the last topic for the day. So that was actually quite a it was quite a packed week, and I was very glad to be back. It was really nice to be able to talk at length about Tales of Arise. It's one of the big first kind of, I know it's not quite the holiday season yet, but it's kind of like a kickoff point in terms of like, this is when we're going to start seeing the big releases to close out the year. As one that was seemingly well received and enjoyed as Tales of Arise. Obviously I have a whole bunch to chew on from the RPG space from the PlayStation Showcase, which isn't usually the case for PlayStation Showcases, but it was in this case. And all the other things that filtered through there, like Pathfinder, like all the other Square Enix news, including their TGS showings and Stranger of Paradise. So really fun to be back. Thank you,
we're happy
George.
to have you back, man.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. George Yang, for joining us this week to talk at length about Tales of Arise and your experience with Life is Strange and some of the other things that you were able to contribute to.
Definitely.
So obviously all of the Tales of anytime. All the Tales of Arise news, reviews, and guides are up on the website. You can visit us at rpgsite.net. Our main social feed is our Twitter at rpgsite. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. We do have a YouTube channel. It's a little bit quiet at the moment, but it is there. You can go to YouTube RPG site if you want to look up any of our old video reviews from James or some of our old casual mode playthroughs. And we will try to be back next week. We think we've sorted out all the issues with the podcast uploads, so those should continue as normal. But until you hear from us next time, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you then.